OTB AM.
With Gillette, we don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made of what matters.
Yeah, if you want to get in touch this morning, you can WhatsApp us. 0879 180 180 is the number. You can always just drop us a comment wherever you're watching this. We stream live on YouTube, on Facebook and on Twitter as well. But the best place to watch us these days is on the OTB Sport app. So just search OTB Sport in the App Store and you can download the app and you can watch everything we put out, including some exclusive content that we put out there. And you can get us live on OTB Sports Radio on all of your smart speakers. Just tell Alexa or Google Home to play OTB Sports Radio on TuneIn and away you go. Eoin, good morning to you.
Good morning, Ger.
Very mediocre fight last night in probably the highlight of a pretty dire game.
Disappointing fight is right, but it was still, without question, the highlight. Hugo Lloris versus Heung-min Son at half-time. Son not tracking back, not putting in the work effort perhaps over the last few games, actually. Really annoys his captain, Hugo Lloris. Goes over to Son at half-time, starts pointing at him, starts shouting at him, and then the cherry on the cake, he grabs Giovanni Lo Celso, who was not even trying to split up the fight, and pushes him in to Heung-min Son, trying to make it look like, hold me back, I'm not going to swing at my own teammate. And he just grabs Giovanni Lo Celso and pushes him into Son, down the tunnel, few more barbs, and then, lo and behold, they come back out of the dressing room at halftime, and they are best buddies all of a sudden. I'm sure that wasn't something they were told to do. As full-time then, a big hug between the two of them, a smile from Heung-min Son at the full-time whistle, but a fairly meek fight. You want to see a bit more, but it was the best thing you could speak about last night, other than to bring up Lo Celso again, his general shithousery. He has really welcomed himself into that category over the last few months while playing for Tottenham Hotspur, and Seamus Coleman, one of the Everton players, really riled up by him last night. He did that thing when he was getting taken off where he kind of walked away from the substitutes board, tried to hide from the referee, tried to hide from his own manager and the sub that was coming on so that he could waste a little bit more time. So other than that, nothing really to speak of. It seems that we've got two football clubs who are pretty happy with their iconic, shiny manager and are just content to exist right now and not very content to actually push the boat out, try something new, and perhaps be a little bit ambitious. 24
hours on from saying he's not just the Italian Big Sam, it's like, well, maybe I was a little bit hasty about Carlo Ancelotti's sudden resurgence, but actually I have a bit of sympathy for the situation that he inherited and the amount of money that they've wasted in recent seasons in the transfer window. So it'll be interesting to see what he does with a transfer window. But with Jose, this is a continuance of his last time at Chelsea, his entire time at Manchester United, and it's of a piece with everything we've seen from him so far at Spurs. This is Jose Mourinho now.
It seems to be, and we tended to give him a little bit of a free pass in the first part of this calendar year because, he didn't have a pre-season, he didn't have a lot of time to work with. Turns out Jose Mourinho doesn't just need a pre-season anymore. He actually needs a big fat checkbook and he needs a transfer window to do something with. And even then, it's no guarantee that he is going to sign well and that he actually has the wherewithal in the transfer market. So, it really is a mediocre situation that Spurs are going to find themselves in once they continue to go this direction with Jose Mourinho. It is a strange situation that they found themselves in, that this is the guy that Daniel Levy really wanted to bring into the club. And it's mad thinking that only 5 months ago he was sitting in a Sky Sports studio and Daniel Levy was holding this guy up as the guy that they needed to bring in to replace Mauricio Pochettino. It's not looking like a good decision right now at all. And it doesn't look like it's going to get any better, because when does he ever arrest things like this? When does the curve eventually come back up? It tends not to.
No.
And that's the issue. I'm not sure if I agree with you on Ancelotti, though. I think Everton are a lot better than some of the failings they've made in the transfer market. I don't think they've made all bad decisions in the transfer market. I think that they've got an excellent squad and they should be doing better than they are doing. They should certainly be showing a bit more ambition than they're showing with some of the attacking players that they have. And all the attackers really, well, Harry Kane in particular, and you look at the likes of Richarlison for Everton, they've both got to be looking towards the exit door at some point soon. But Harry Kane is locked up into this big, long contract, and Daniel Levy will be stretching that out for as long as possible.
At a low deal. I mean, we said it at the time don't sign that deal, it's a bad deal, it doesn't pay you enough and it locks you in, and here he is reaping the rewards of not having one of the super agents as his agent. 7:35 this morning here on OTB AM. A very busy programme for you coming up. We're going to speak with Ronan O'Gara a little bit later on about the situation in rugby generally at the moment. There's some specific rule changes that are being mooted about using fewer subs. Maybe you'd have the same amount of subs on the bench, but you'd only be able to access 5 of them over the course of a game. Might this open things up in the second half? Would it change the constellation of the money that you invest in? All that kind of stuff as well. Talk about games going behind a paywall because of the CVC money. We'll talk about that a little bit later on as well. We are going to talk about Spurs with Martin Lipton a little bit later on as well. And on top of that, we have a look back at some of the biggest fights in football history. But first, before all that, we want to bring you some of the stuff that happened on the show last night. And a reminder, of course, OTBAM is brought to you by Gillette. We don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made of what matters. First up this morning, we're going to hear from Paul McGinley speaking with Joe Malloy last night about the transformation, physically, literally, metaphorically, of Bryson DeChambeau.
But here's what I don't fully understand, though. If I go and put on 2-3 stone, and not all of it in Bryson's case is muscle, by the way, but if I go on and put on that kind of weight, like, it's not like he's so much heavier than everybody else on tour. How is he hitting the ball still so far? I know his driver is 5 degrees. Is there something in his swing, or how he... It's not just weight.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that I've done a lot of research on and talked to a lot of people, the real experts in it. I mean, I know a little bit, but the real experts on it. And I spoke to the head club fitter in TaylorMade today to get a kind of lowdown from him exactly what is going on. And basically, it's a combination, just getting technical for a moment with the answer here, Joe. The bottom line is when a driver hits a golf ball in the modern game, the face bends. And then you immediately have a spring effect coming off the face. So if you are fortunate to have a lot of clubhead speed, like, say, a Rory McIlroy or a Brooks Koepka or a Dustin Johnson or a Bryson DeChambeau now, you are going to quantifiably get a bigger spring off it than Joe Malloy is going to get, who can't create that kind of speed. That's why technology is really helping these guys that have speed. So your question was quite right there in what you said, that he's following the data. He's using science to follow the data. And the data said last year, Joe, there's an interesting stat I did in my research last winter. The leading 100 players in the world rankings as of 1st of January this year, only one of those was ranked in the top 100 in driving accuracy on the PGA Tour. Right? So basically, it's not that important to hit the ball that straight anymore, but it's really important to hit it a long way. So what he has done is he said, right, I'm going to go and find a way of hitting the ball further. So first of all, he's got to create a club head speed. So that's what he's done. And all the work that he's been doing in the speed, doing in the gym, it's not just about building muscles. It's also about creating speed. Everything is based on creating speed. And the more strength you have in your body, the more of a foundation that you have, and more of a sturdiness in your body, the more you can rotate around your body. And that's where you get the speed from. So once he gets to speed, then you go back into the science again, and you go to the club fitters and you say, right, the ideal launch conditions. You know, when I was a boy going out to Portmarnock watching the pros play in the Royal Dublin in the Irish Opens, there used to be what we call the aeroplane shot. The ball would take off really low, the old bladder ball, and then rise up through the wind. That's not the flight anymore the players are looking for. They're looking for high launch, low spin, which is kind of a rainbow effect. That's the kind of ideal flight to maximize out distance. So with this added speed that he has, now he has to try to get the ideal launch conditions. And that's what he's done. He's took a lot of weight off, a lot of loft off. He's down to 5 degrees loft. And he's hitting about 5 degrees up on the ball through it as well. So he's gaining back that launch by hitting up through the ball, and hence he's creating 10 degrees of a dynamic loft, as they call it, through the ball. That's why the ball is going up in the air, not a lot of spin. And, of course, he's getting a huge bounce, trampoline effect off the face, because he's bending the face so much more. So technically, sorry for going into that, but
no,
that's the
fascinating.
reason why... Yeah,
no,
that's the reason why he's able to do it.
No, that's fascinating, because too many people have said, oh, put on 2-3 stone and you can hit it like DeChambeau, and that's not the case. It's too technical and there's too much technology. So you've explained that brilliantly. And to further your point, so I mentioned he's number 1 on tour for distance. He's 112th for driving accuracy. So the next question then is, how does the game combat this or treat this? And at the moment, and DeChambeau has figured it, and a lot of players have, bomb and gouge. You can, get it up there as far as you can and gouge it onto the green with a wedge if you miss the fairway. And, you know, like, he quipped at the start of the week to Donald Ross, the architect, "Sorry, Donald, but I'm going to bomb it by all your bunkers." You know,
and he did.
He did.
And he did.
Traditionalists are spinning in their grave. So what does the game do here now? I mean, are we now at the point where it's either 8,000-yard golf courses, or they change the rough, or will they change the ball? Can they do something about the technology legally?
Well, the horses bolt to a large extent, Joe. There's been a huge, for the first time ever, despite everybody from Jack Nicklaus to Tiger Woods to Tom Watson, Gary Player, down through the last 5 and 7 years, all telling the governing bodies, the USGA in America and the RNA over here, listen, you've lost control of golf club manufacturing as well as golf balls. You got to do something about it. They didn't listen, nothing. It's now a runaway train. They finally come out after this huge survey that they commissioned at the start of this year and said, yes, you know what? We have the club technology has gone too far, and it's absolutely on the max at the moment, and we are going to do something about it. Whether that's going to be reining it in, they haven't said yet. All they've said is, yes, this is a line in the sand. And that's the first time they've ever admitted it, despite everybody in the game telling them. It's the first time they've actually said, yes, we do have a problem. So it's a runaway train at the moment. What are they going to do about it? Well, the question is, of course, money comes into it like it comes into everything. You know, if you're Titleist or TaylorMade or Callaway, who have spent hundreds of millions of dollars on all the research and development of these golf clubs and golf balls, applying to the rules, and all of a sudden the rules are changed, you know, are you in a position then to legally challenge that? That may well be the case. They've got to navigate their way through that if they do change the ball and change the club. Personally, for me, what I would like to see more of is better course setup, Joe. And, you know, you mentioned earlier about Rory's comment. Well, I think the most impressive performance for him so far, considering the distance he's hit the ball from Bryson this year, has been in Hilton Head, because that's a very, very narrow golf course. I've played that tournament a few times. It's incredibly narrow. It's as narrow a golf course as I've ever played. So able to navigate his way around that was very impressive to a top 10 finish. So I think course setups can really help. But again, let's move away a little bit from that and look at a bigger picture here. The PGA Tour, who run golf in America, the tournaments in America, they're in, as they say themselves, in the entertainment business. And if you look at the top of the world rankings, all the superstars, Rory, Dustin Johnson, Brooks Koepka, Bryson DeChambeau, wherever you want to go in the top 10, one big hitter after another big hitter. And really the PGA Tour, being in the entertainment business, they want these guys to excel. So what they do is they create golf courses. They're not going to penalize these guys too much. And as a result, the fairways are a lot wider in America than they are in Europe, for example. Hence, how you saw how much the American team struggled 2 years ago when they came to play a narrow course to the French for Paris National during the Ryder Cup. So the fairways are a lot wider. And secondly, you know, the rough is not as heavy as it would be on European courses. So the course setup could be something to mitigate it. And then, unfortunately, in the PGA Tour in America, they play in such ideal conditions. You saw the weather conditions the last 4 weeks. You know, even when the rain comes, it just makes the golf course even easier, because long and soft is exactly what they like. They water the golf courses heavily, so the ball's stopping very quickly when it hits the deck, which is exactly what they want because they hit it so far. So if you got bouncy conditions, that would make it a little bit tougher. If you had heavier rough, that would make it a bit tougher. And then if you had the inclement weather conditions that we have, certainly in Europe, in terms of you know, wind and stuff like that, that would make it a lot tougher. So that challenge is coming, Joe. Let's not jump to conclusions too much about DeChambeau. His best finish ever his 15th in a major championship, as many PGA Tour events as he's won. He hasn't excelled in the majors yet. There's a big one coming in Harding Park, another golf course that I played, that I know very well. It's a really tough, old-fashioned golf course. I know the rough is up there from some people in San Francisco I've been talking to who've been playing it, and it's normally winded air, so it's quite close to the sea. So that's the real acid test for DeChambeau, and I'm really, really intrigued to see how he navigates his way through that.
OTB AM.
It's 7:44. You're watching OTB AM. It's Gilroy and Eoin Sheahan with you until 10 o'clock this morning. If you want to get in touch with us, you can WhatsApp us. 087 9180 180 is the number. That was Paul McGinley speaking with Joe Malloy last night on OTB. If you want to go to the App Store or the Google Play Store, search for OTB Sports. You can download our brand new app. You'll find the full podcast there, and you can subscribe to Golf Weekly as well. As we mentioned earlier on, Ronan O'Gara is going to join us on OTBM around about 9 o'clock this morning. But first, let's set the rugby table for you this morning. We're going to hear from the Connacht coach now, Andy Friend, who was on Monday Night Rugby last night. Here he is talking about how the last few months have changed how he views the game.
Yeah, I think one of the things, it'll be more effective time. So for a real simple thing, mate. We normally train a Monday, Tuesday. We have our Wednesday off. We train Thursday, Friday, and we move into the game. We're going to move to a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday training week. Thursday will be our day off into a Friday into the normal week. There's lots of different reasons for that, but we reflected and we discussed and talked about that as a coaching group, and we had a little working group working on that. We felt that was the right way to do it. The way our meetings are structured throughout the course of the day, we're going to change that up. We don't always need a meeting. I think there's a massive opportunity for players to actually meet rather than, for it to be like a school where it's, teachers up the front and kids down the back. That's not the way we play rugby. We play rugby with these men. They're out there making decisions, so we need to give them space to make decisions, and we've added some of those things within our training schedule for next year, which I think is going to be really exciting for the players. So, and then just simply too the Zoom calls. I'd never been on a Zoom call. And the ease and the simplicity of now to have meetings where you can do it within your own home. There's not the travel time to work from work, which often ties you up. So do we have to be in at work at 7 o'clock in the morning to get our whole working day done? No, we don't. We can actually have an hour Zoom meeting on a Saturday or Sunday afternoon, depending on when we play, which allows us to spend time with the kids in the morning if you need to, get them off to school and allow to come in. So all those little things, and there's another array of those too, which we've come up with, which, again, as I said, I'm pretty excited to see how they work, but I think they'll add value to the program.
I suspect everybody is having those thoughts at the moment. I mean, what an interesting period, and it's far from the most significant aspect of it, obviously, given what's gone on, and people's lives ultimately have been lost, but that the whole world has been forced to almost sit with themselves and do a bit of reflection, even if they didn't want to. There's only so much Netflix you can watch. You've just at a certain point had to sit with your thoughts. Do you suspect then, when you talk about that pressure to fill the day, so would you aspire then as a person to spend less of your time working and maybe more time on family or on yourself, or you'll be filling the day just differently the way you've outlined in your previous answer?
Yeah, this is my 26th year of coaching. I think I've probably learned through that 26 years to attempt to get balance, and I'll call it me balance. So part of me is definitely work, part of me is definitely my family, part of me is me just doing what I want to do, whether it's walking or whether it's listening to a podcast or listening to an audible book or riding my bike, whatever it is. I believe over time I've managed to find a balance there, which I'm really comfortable with. So I don't know whether it will necessarily change the things that I've been doing. I have really enjoyed cooking again, and that was something I definitely wasn't doing before. And it's amazing how therapeutic that can be. At the end of a long day, coming home, and my wife's, she's been brilliant, but there's now times where I want just to say, Kez, I actually wouldn't mind a glass of wine, and I'll make dinner tonight, because I find that actually quite refreshing and quite therapeutic. So I just think it's been a brilliant reset button for the world, just to stop and say, how have we been spending our time, and can we do this better? And I think if we're really honest, I think we could always find fault in the way we've done it, or more importantly, find improvement in the way we can do things. And I just hope that what we don't do is go back to our old norm, because as we've seen, it probably wasn't as effective as we thought it was.
No, it's true. I think we're all running around like busy fools half the time just to make ourselves feel a bit more important than we probably actually are. So yeah, it's going to be interesting over the coming weeks and months. So if in come August 22nd time, if you go home and start bashing the beef on the counter, I can assume the result didn't go your way. That'll be a different type of therapy there. Can I get your thoughts on where the game is? Because you have a global perspective, and we're at where if the world is at an interesting time, rugby is at a very interesting precipice. And, we'd Matt Williams on recently, and he summed it up neatly when he said that the first era of professional rugby is over. And it really does feel that way. For instance, the word seems to have come through in the last 24 hours that CVC will take that stake in the Six Nations, probably an end to terrestrial TV for the Six Nations. South Africa's inclusion probably imminent. The global calendar is up for grabs. World Rugby, and it depends who you're listening to some extent or other, is beholden to English and French clubs. They'll say they're not. Australian rugby is in the red. There's probably half a dozen other things I could list out. What do you see as the priority for the game over the next 18 months, or even the step that you would like to see in terms of the quote-unquote the global calendar over the next year or two?
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of discussion for a long, long time around this global calendar, and it depends upon which hemisphere you're living in as to how valuable you see that being. And certainly as an Aussie back home, when you're down there, you think, geez, it would make good sense to do it. Now that I'm living up here and coaching in Ireland, it probably doesn't make good sense to do it, because it doesn't necessarily work in with the Six Nation plans that we have here, and what the French and the English and the Pro 14 clubs want to do. I think the most important thing with all of this is looking into player welfare. And I know we use that word a lot, but some of the models that I've seen there around what they're looking for with a global calendar, there's ongoing games like week after week after week after week. We just came off the back of a 13-week block in Pro 14. World Cup year this year, as we know, and the reason it went to 13 was because of the World Cup year that we had. But that in itself, that was attritional. Like, that's full on. And to then go to a 13-week in the global calendar is minimal. We're looking at 16 plus. You're looking at massive long chunks of rugby. And I don't know how sustainable that is unless you want to have squads of 50 plus, and that then becomes financially very, very difficult. So there's a lot of ramifications around it. I think it's healthy that we're having the discussions around that. There are definitely smarter brains than I that will work out what it is or which way we're going to go with it. But I think the quicker we can come to resolution there and just get on with playing rugby, the better it's going to be.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
It's Andy Friend there, the Connacht coach, always a very thoughtful individual, and as Joe said, a very clear global perspective about where the game is going. The law of unintended consequences that you when you're talking about a global calendar and those blocks of matches for squads suddenly requiring up to 50 players, and then all of a sudden it's like, well, the benefit of the global season, you should be able to have smaller squads, and then the expense of that suddenly comes into sharp relief. 0879 180 180 is the number if you want to get in touch with us this morning on WhatsApp. We're at 7:53 here this Tuesday morning. Plenty of football coming up. Martin Lipton's going to join us to talk about Jose Mourinho's Spurs around about 8:15. We'll talk Liverpool with Nathan after 9 o'clock. But now we're going to hear from Pat Nevin talking on last night's football show. You can subscribe to the Football Show podcast wherever you get your podcasts. But again, the best place to do that is on the OTB Sports app. Just search OTB Sports in the App Store. Is Jack Grealish ready to play for a top four side? Here's Pat Nevin's view.
So with 9 games to go, he's broken the Premier League record for most fouls against. And generally this is spoken of as a compliment to the player, like an Eden Hazard type, will top this list, or Ronaldo, and the implication is, well, they're causing havoc and defenders can't handle them, so they have to foul them, or maybe they're being targeted because they're the best player on the pitch. So Graham Souness was on Sky Sports in advance of the game, I think. I don't think it was during the game that he made this point. But it was an interesting observation. I want to get your thoughts on it on the far side. So here's Souness on this point that Grealish, now the most fouled player in the league and has broken the record as the most fouled player in the league. Have a listen.
There's no doubt he has genuine quality. It's just how you think he's ready to go to a bigger team, and in a bigger team he wouldn't have to take so many touches, because people will be showing for the ball and making better movement for him. I'm not so sure. I think... what can I say? We won't know until, or if that should happen. He has got qualities, but I'm trying to think how. See, at the top teams today, do Liverpool carry any passengers when they don't have the ball? No. We're Man City, definitely not. No one has anyone who is standing with their hands on their hips when you lose the ball. Everyone has to get the sleeves rolled up and press, or be the second one to press or the third one to press. That's something it's not in his game right now.
Is that fair, Emil? Is he standing with his hands on his hips?
I don't think so myself, but he's in a team that is not necessarily on the front foot like your top teams, where you give the ball away and then you suddenly go and pounce on people like that. When Liverpool give the ball away, within 3 passes, they try and get it back straight away. Whereas Villa, they will drop back into a certain and just keep a certain shape and be very solid. So I'm guessing it's just the tactics that were maybe that they're playing at.
Are you related to him? No, I'm not denying his talent, but for me, there's a big question mark.
So I'm not sure they're all exactly the specific quotes, that clip, but he also went on to, I mean, the point he was making specifically on the most fouled point was that he's not seeing the picture early enough. He said, when I was playing, I would not want to be the most fouled player in the Premier League. That means I'm holding onto the ball for too long. That means I'm not seeing the picture early enough. I am taking extra touches, rather, when I don't need to. It means you're not seeing the picture quick enough. There's no doubt he's got ability, but I'm yet to be convinced. I know he's got 7 goals this season. And he went on to say things like, when I was being coached at Liverpool, I was told to make the striker's mind up with my body movement, the way I get the ball out of my feet, the way I'm shaping to kick the ball. I think that anyone that gets tackled that much and gets that many fouls isn't seeing the picture quick enough. I always come back to it. Would I like to play against him? I would have loved to play against Grealish. He allows me to get to him. He allows me to get physical with him. I don't want to play against a Paul Scholes or a Xavi or an Iniesta, popping off 1-2 touch. I want to play against people like him because I know he's going to allow me to mess him around, frothing at the mouth at just the thought of throwing Jack Grealish around. So I suspect you're somebody who got fouled in his day. Talk to us about it. It's an interesting observation.
It's interesting, a couple of things, right? First of all, Souness talks about your players that stand with their hands and their hips. And if Grealish is doing that, you know, you ain't going to win anything, you'll probably go down. I remember a player, Georgie Kinclads, who played for Manchester City. Absolutely wonderful, great player. Get you relegated. And I'm the sort of guy supposed to like that sort of player. I'd say the same about De La Fea. No, exactly the same. Brilliant, brilliant player. One of the worst off the ball that I've seen in many, many years. But because he does something special fairly frequently, people let him away with it. But if you play with 10 players most of the time, you'll end up getting relegated, unless you are Eric Cantona or you're Maradona or whatever, or you're Messi. You can get away with that. But you need to be unbelievably special in what you add to the team. Right. So with that, I'm with it. I'm with Souness on that one. I absolutely accept it. Getting fouls I think that's a much more important and interesting point. I really liked Graham's line on it. I mean, having been kicked a few times by him myself, I know that he wanted to be able to get close, and he would love that opportunity. And that's where statistics don't actually help you that well when they're that bland and that wide. It's not the fouls, it's the type of fouls, where they are, and the effect that they have, right? So if I get the ball, Hazard was pretty damn guilty at this, and it just to drive me nuts. He'd get the ball, hold it, stop, turn, and look round, and then somebody melt him, somebody thump him. And you're thinking, you're on the halfway line, mate. You ain't getting a yellow card for that. You've not caused any danger. But yeah, you've been fouled another couple of times. That doesn't do it you or anyone. It's just going to slow you down. What you want to be, see if you're fouled, you want to be in the last third, preferably in the penalty area if you possibly can, where you can get a dangerous free kick in. You want to actually be travelling at pace when you're fouled. That's really important, that. Don't get fouled when you're stationary if you can help it, because there's nothing you can do about that, and it doesn't look, it's just a foul. If you're going at pace and you get the same foul, he'll get a yellow. That's just the way it is. It looks that much worse. And as soon as he's got a yellow, he can't do it again, and you're free. So little things like that I took for granted through an entire career of learning how to take hits, where to take hits, how to draw hits in to get fouls or penalties or whatever in specific places. And, you know, I look at some players and I think, well, I don't think you've figured that out yet. And for me, it was kind of second nature. You understood immediately what you had to do. Get into a place where if you're fouled, they're in trouble, not just themselves, but their team's in trouble as well. And maybe that's the point I would. You put statistics up all over the place. I want to know what the statistics are for the free kicks that you get in dangerous areas, like 20, 25 yards out, or indeed closer than that.
And without me or, pertinently, Graham Souness been able to give you a breakdown of Grealish's fouls, the implication is clear that he's taken too much out of the ball and he's not given it quick enough, or he's not seeing the bigger picture. What's your sense of Grealish as a player?
No, I really like him. I love the fact that he's got enough technical ability to go wherever he likes. Now, I have to say, you know, he has grown fabulously. You know, it's taken, you know, in some ways he hasn't grown a lot, but the maturity on the pitch has actually grown a lot from where he was before, because none of it was pre-thought before. And there's a bit of me that likes that as well, but eventually you need to mature into a player who Graham calls it the bigger picture. I call it kind of an awareness, a 360 awareness and a game awareness. It's the same sort of thing. He's seen a bit more of that, but players that have game awareness, you know, they'll play. He plays great little short balls, but you see the ball the way you drag 3 players towards it and then ping it 25, 35, 40 yards away. You know, you've taken 3-4 players out of the game without going round them. That's as good as anything in the game, and maybe he doesn't do that quite as often enough for a very, very top player. You know, he's a great player, he's a very good player, whatever. But to go to that next step, the question you asked before, is he going to be a top 4 player? Well, you're not going to. Man City aren't going to buy him. They're not going to touch him, I don't think, because there are too many weaknesses in that game that have to be ironed out. Too many decisions that have to be ironed out and changed. For Pep to do that, that's a massive work in progress that he would have to take on.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station.
OTB Sports in your pocket. Listen to OTB Sports Radio 24/7.
Until that habit is broken, do you not realise how crazy those things were?
Watch your favourite OTB videos.
The benefit of being suspended, me and Scoresy were out every night, a couple of nights before the game.
Read all the latest sports news and opinions, all in one place, the OTB Sports app. Listen, watch, read. Wherever you are, we're always with you. The OTB Sports app, available to download now from your app store.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, we don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made of what matters.
Right, you're very welcome. It is 2 minutes past 8 this morning here on OTBAM. Hello to all our podcast listeners who are just tuning in. If you've done that, then you've missed Paul McGinley talking about Bryson DeChambeau, Andy Friend from Monday Night Rugby talking about some lessons from lockdown, very practical stuff about changing meeting times and doing more stuff over Zoom, not maybe forcing everybody to spend time travelling when actually you don't really need to. And then Pat Nevin talking about last night, Jack Grealish and how he needs to learn to be fouled better. Kind of a Beckettian outlook on what needs to happen for Jack Grealish, who yesterday took to Twitter to do the shrug emoji, can't please everybody, and then also to retweet stats which suggest that he is the second most creative in terms of chances created player in the Premier League this season, which I think, Eoin, is probably fairly legitimate from Jack Grealish to go out there and remind everybody that he is still the prize asset in the Premier League when it comes to signing somebody this summer.
Like, you wouldn't want Graham Souness going out to actually diminish your market value, would you, or to diminish your possibility of getting a big move this year? That being said, I think if Villa go down, it's almost a certainty that he'll leave. If they manage to stay up, there might be some possibility that they keep him, because it's going to be hard for teams to splash the cash that Villa will then require. So I'm not sure if he actually needs to go out and do that. I didn't see his tweet, but for him to actually go out and try and fight back, I'm all for somebody fighting their corner, but I think the stock is pretty high for Jack Grealish. I don't think what Graham Souness is going to say will actually diminish his value or the appetite that people have to try and sign him this summer too much.
It's a lot of money, right? Because it's looking at one of the stories today, Tammy Abraham wants to go in and renegotiate. He's got 2 years left on his deal and he's waiting to see if Chelsea sign a striker this summer. And if they don't, he's knocking on the door and saying, I want a new deal and I want to be paid the same as Callum Hudson-Odoi, who's on 130 grand a week. I'm on 50. That's a lot of, that's double and then another half. That's a lot of cash.
It really is.
If you're Jack Grealish and you're like Graham Souness is getting you from 130 back to 100, you're like, shut up.
Getting you I'm sure that's not going to be the case though. I was kind of more thinking, does Graham Souness start ringing alarm bells in scouts' heads, or people who've already made their transfer plan for the summer? Are people now starting to question that? Does Souness have that power? Do you think that people will actually listen to that? I'm not sure they do, to be honest.
A conversation just starts. Idle chatter becomes, it's like in every industry, a little bit of idle chatter, a viewpoint gets formed by an opinion maker, that opinion hardens. It's like, well, actually, can we just go back and look at Grealish? Or the chairman, which is actually the worst part, the chairman or the chief executive, who never really bothers with this scouting stuff, is like, but what was Souness saying about this guy? It's just you want me to spend 100 million on this guy? Souness says he's not actually a top 4 player. Just these things happen, you know?
Yeah.
That's why I would be fighting back.
I don't think it's going to diminish things too much. Like, the only thing is that, what if Tottenham Hotspur want to go out and sign him? I mean, Jose Mourinho was literally sat in the studio beside Graham Souness recently. Like, I mean, we can say it's just punditry, it doesn't really matter, but I mean, Jose actually was employed by the organisation recently. He clearly thinks that line of work matters, and opinions matter, I guess. Like, Manchester United are one of the other clubs linked with him. I mean, are they now looking at their academy products coming through and thinking to themselves that we don't need to make a big splash for Jack Grealish this summer as well? So
I think Grealish is I still think Grealish is the perfect Manchester United player, because he can actually play in any of those positions. Like, obviously, he's not going to play as a number 9, but he can play behind the strikers, or he can play midfield. That's the other thing that he's been doing. When Nathan, were you here last week when Nathan was talking about Bruno Fernandes basically getting the ball from the goalkeeper and playing 1-2s the whole way up the field and then scoring? Jack Grealish isn't quite at that level. He obviously hasn't scored anything like what Fernandes has done, but he has been essentially getting the ball very deep and at various stages being one of the people whose job it is to kind of get things going when the rest of the team is like, oh, we don't really deserve to be here, do we? So you could add him into that Man United team, I think, and play a load of games, play up to 45 or 50 games over the course of the season, and play in a bunch of different positions with Pogba instead of Matic, instead of Greenwood or Rashford even, like, depending on the scenario and depending on how you want to play. I just think that he'd be a Jenga piece for Manchester United who would relieve pressure on everybody else around him and allow you to get minutes or periodise your minutes for everybody in a way that you can't do. So I think that's going to be something that we will see when Villa go down. That's how I'm talking about this now. 8 minutes past 8 here this morning. If you want to get in touch, you can WhatsApp us 087 9180 180. We want to talk about the fight last night, because Spurs Everton, the actual football wasn't great, Eoin.
No, it wasn't. To be honest with you, the fight wasn't great. Let's face it, Heung-min Son, Hugo Lloris, pretty meek example of what you're supposed to do when you get into a fight with your teammate. We didn't have a headbutt. We didn't have any real punches. Too many hugs and smiles at the full-time whistle. So this, folks, Heung-min Son and Hugo Lloris, is how you do it. Here are the top 5 incidents of when teammates go to war against one another. So at number 5, we've got Emmanuel Adebayor against Nicholas Bentner. This makes the list because this is the headbutt that launched the banter era at Arsenal. It is that important. Now, people may dispute if there was a headbutt at all. People may dispute if the banter era was actually in existence before this, but who actually cares about that? Because all we do know is that Arsenal were 4-1 down against Tottenham Hotspur in the Carling Cup in 2008. Adebayor and Nicholas Bentner get into a tussle, and Bentner emerges with a cut on his nose. So this is the old chestnut, by all accounts, of not passing to your teammate and your teammate calling you out for not wanting to pass to your teammate. But then we had the separation, which is always key in these things. Who were the peace commissioners? The peace commissioners in this case were Howard Webb and William Gallas. Howard Webb did such a good job. He got an MBE later in his life for splitting up this fight. Arsene Wenger, meanwhile, says he didn't even see the fight and doubts that Nicholas Bentner and Emmanuel Adebayor ever played together in an Arsenal shirt. So that's at number 5. At number 4, we've got Alan Shearer versus Keith Gillespie. I'm giving this one a mention because it occurred not on a football pitch, but on the streets of Dublin. So Irish bias coming in here. And let me quote Gillespie here. "We were away on a mid-season break and I knocked some cutlery off the table accidentally. Shearer looked over to say, 'Pick that up.' And I just didn't like the way he was talking to me. I just turned around and said, 'Right, outside now.' And he took me up on the offer. I didn't think he would, but I was a bit too proud to back down. We ended up going outside and I took one swing and missed and he hit me and that was good night. I did actually spend a night in hospital because when he hit me, I fell and hit my head on a plant pot. I was unconscious. He came and saw me the next day and we had a laugh about it."
Ooh.
Nothing like having a good old laugh with your mate after flirting with serious physical assault. That's Alan Shearer versus Keith Gillespie at number 4. At number 3, top 3 very, very famous moments. Number 3, Graham Lasso versus David Batty. This is a true underdog story, a story of hope that you can achieve something spectacular if you truly believe hard enough. That's right, you can punch David Batty in the throat. even though there is a high chance he knows where you live. Such moments of courage just don't exist in football anymore, because this is 1995-96, Blackburn League champions, they're in the Champions League. The entire thing kicks off when Batty and Lasso go for the same ball and clock each other over the sideline. They go sprawling to the deck, they both get up pretty angry, but Lasso gets things underway. He goes straight in with a left hook to the throat of Batty before Tactics Tim Sherwood, acts as Peace Commissioner, bundles in and saves the day. So in his book, here's what Graham Lasso said about the incident. I hit the deck, and as I got up, he came at me very aggressively. He was being threatening and screaming things. His face was contorted with anger, as if he was going to rip my head off. Hitting him was more of a preemptive strike than anything. If I'd not hit him, I felt he was going to hit me. I swung at him, connected, and knew immediately that I had broken my left hand. I'm not a fighter. I hadn't closed my fist properly. I was in a lot of pain, which just made me feel more ridiculous. Blackburn ended up getting beaten pretty easily by Spartak Moscow on the night. Lasso was actually responsible for pretty much all the goals, but he won on a unanimous decision in the only battle that mattered that night. What would have happened if he actually punched him in the face and connected with a bone? It would have been way more worse damage. He broke his hand punching David Batty's throat. Some neck muscles by David Batty. Number 2, Steve McManaman versus Bruce Grobbelaar, probably the most famous of them all. We all know the details. It's a Merseyside derby. Everton have just scored after a poor clearance from Steve McManaman. Bruce Grobbelaar now is a very, very, very angry man and has a right pop off McManaman. The general rule of thumb here, if you don't know, is that you would have to be absolutely crazy to take Bruce Grobbelaar on. But fair play to McManaman for doing so, because after receiving a shove in the face, a proper face palm to the face, he responds with a similarly hefty shove to the face, and it looks like he actually gives Grobbelaar a bit of whiplash. You'd have to say, in fact, that McManaman won this face-pushing contest, a truly excellent display of forearm work, I think it's fair to say. Now, the interesting thing about this one is that there are varying stories about what actually happened next. So in an interview at 442, Steve McManaman was asked, did you and Grobbelaar continue the fisticuffs in the changing room at Goodison? It was a reader's question. And he responded saying, no, not really. It ended there and then. A couple of slaps and punches, and there it ended. But Grobbelaar on Soccer AM said this. We went back into the dressing room, and yes, there were a lot of boots thrown at each other. Then we had to go and get in the bath. And normally, if you've done anything bad, the rest of the players don't say anything. But this time, I had to do something, so I took one of the players, stuck his head under the water, and sat on it. Who it was, remains a secret. What goes on in the dressing room stays in the dressing room. Now, Bruce, that is weird. That is Bruce Grobbelaar against Steve McManaman as number 2. Who knows what actually happened in that dressing room that night? But number 1, the undisputed champion of when teammates go to war against one another. It is Lee Bowyer against Kieran Dyer, and this just has everything. It's not just a fight, it is about the occasion. It is 2005, it is Newcastle United against Aston Villa in the Premier League, and it is a game not just known for its brawl, because this is the game where Stephen Taylor performed one of the greatest pieces of interpretive dance the world has ever seen. Not just football, but the world has ever seen. You will recall that Taylor pulls off a move called getting shot by a sniper as Darius Vassell is about to finish the ball into the empty net. Stephen Taylor comes with his arm and then proceeds to get shot in the leg. It's incredible. He gets sent off. Gareth Barry bangs in a penalty, bangs in another penalty. Newcastle's players then start to get really sick of how shambolic they are, and they turn on each other. So Lee Bowyer goes full paranoia at this stage, starts to believe that teammate Kieran Dyer was intentionally not giving him the ball. And here is what Kieran Dyer said. Bowyer went crazy. Effing pass me the ball, he screamed. What are you talking about, I said. You never passed me the ball, he said. I told him to do one, but he chuntered a bit more. A few minutes later, he wanted me to lay it square to him. I thought there were better options. It wasn't personal. Bo went absolutely nuts. Effing hell, he yelled. You never passed me the ball. The reason I don't pass you the ball, I said, is because you're effing shit. I think he hit me 4 times. The punches didn't hurt, but by the time the 4th punch came, I thought, F this, and launched one back at him. Gareth Barry, Peace Commissioner, rushed in to restrain Bo and drag him away. Bowyer's shirt was ripped down to his chest and he was still snarling and snapping and trying to get himself free. Now, this is the part of the story where Graham Souness is supposed to be neutral, do his press conference, and not take a side on this. But Graham Souness did not do that thing. Here's what he said. I think Lee Bowyer is indefensible. I think he is guilty, as the pictures show, of throwing more than one punch, and he has to accept whatever punishment comes his way. But Kieran, we feel, has an argument here. I've seen the incident once on television, and I've been assured by Kieran that he did not throw any punches. Now, remember, this is 2005. The punishment here for Lee Bowyer was huge. He got fined 6 weeks' wages, £210,000, and told by Chairman Freddie Shepherd that he should go down on his hands and knees if he ever wants to get forgiveness, which is interesting because Newcastle sold a heap of players, including most of their midfield that summer. Lee Bowyer was not one of the players that they decided to sell that summer. So I don't know what the hell the other midfielders were doing that they managed to get sold and Lee Bowyer did not. Ultimately, Lee Bowyer, Kieran Dyer ended up playing with each other again at West Ham later in their career. So even the number one incident here had a happy ending. So good times all round.
Did anybody who was involved in a fight win a game? So Arsenal got beaten 5-1 by Spurs. Spartak Moscow beat Blackburn 3-0. I presume Villa win that game. I think they're 2-0 up the last I saw there.
Yeah, they do. They at the Merseyside derby, I'm not actually sure how that finishes up. Is
3-0. 3-0 to Villa beat Newcastle. Sorry. Wow. That's
but I guess it is unusual. That was one thing that kind of came up last night. It was like, are the smiles here because they've got the 3 points? Is it because somebody told them to do it, or is it because they're genuinely friends again? I think option C is probably the least likely of those.
What a cast of characters in that Newcastle game. Is Shea Given goals for?
Yes, I think so.
So it's Given, it's Stephen Carr, it's Shearer, it's a Villa team, Juan Pablo Angel, and it's Graham Souness on the sideline. I'm kind of surprised Souness just didn't box the head off Bowyer and go, yeah, I'll have it, come on.
Yeah. I don't believe unbelievable. Like, they just don't do it like they used to.
They don't. We miss it, right? 6 weeks wages, and was he banned from football?
He was banned from football because they were both sent off. Like, they finished the game with 8 men that day in Newcastle.
And still Villa only managed to win 3-0. That's an indication of how great they were or otherwise. 17 minutes past 8 here this morning. We've got Shane Hannon with us. Shane, good morning to you. How are you?
Not too bad, lads. Keeping well.
What's going on?
Not a whole pile. I enjoyed that. I don't know if you mentioned, I think Robbie Keane was involved. He decked Edgar Davids in training once for Spurs. I think Jamie O'Hara told the story earlier this year on television, but there's been some serious ones. I was trying to think of any in GEA. I don't know if soccer seems to be a breeding ground for handbags, but I don't know if GEA is it's as prevalent. I'm sure it happens in training quite regularly, but you don't see it in matches too often.
Punches regularly thrown in training, and sure, the Kerry lads don't think training's going well unless somebody's having a fight. Isn't that right?
Yeah, it's true. And ask Tommy Welch, I'd say, about anything in Kilkenny. I would suspect that a lot of the teammates despise each other in those behind closed doors training sessions. You're right, we haven't actually seen it on the pitch too much in actual games.
In training in the World Cup in 2002, after Saipan, Robbie Keane smacked Niall Quinn across the face, apparently. It's just one of those things in training.
Also, 2002, looking back on this, Freddie Lundberg versus Olaf Melberg in the build-up to that World Cup. 2002 was just a petri dish of kind of in-house hatred, really. Everybody was at it, really. It's just Roy Keane walked away.
What have you got for us, Shane?
Yeah, we'll kick off with the handbags from last night in the Premier League, lads, because Spurs captain Hugo Lloris insists there's no problem between himself and teammate Heung-min Son. The pair had to be separated, as we mentioned, as a half-time argument became heated on the pitch. Lloris and Son were later seen acting friendly, with the keeper saying the issue had been smoothed over. The incident was the highlight of a drab 1-0 win for Spurs over Everton in the Premier League at the new White Hart Lane. A first-half own goal from Michael Keane was enough to separate the sides. Jose Mourinho was happy with Tottenham's performance as they moved up to 8th in the table.
You need so much points like we need when the previous match was really bad and left us with negative feelings, and negative feelings also attract a little bit of pressure. I think was a very solid performance against a very good team. I think the way we controlled the game defensively was magnificent.
Tonight then, Arsenal seek a 4th Premier League win in a row when Leicester City visit the Emirates. That match kicks off at 8:15pm this evening. Leicester City could start that game in 4th place should Chelsea win away to Crystal Palace, which gets underway at 6 o'clock. Chelsea boss Frank Lampard says he can handle the pressure.
I enjoy it. It's something I was used to as a player. I think as a manager you certainly take more on board than as an individual player. So that's been slightly different for me because you take the expectations of the club and the fans, etc. So that ramps up, but that's what we're in it for. That's what it's all about. And, all I want to do now is make sure we get everything right that we can control, which is preparation, maintaining ourselves in between games and making sure that we recover right and prepare for each game as they come. Those rules remain the same, and we have to handle the pressure.
And Norwich City will edge closer to the trapdoor should they lose away to Watford tonight. Both of those games, the latter games, have 6 p.m. starts. Meanwhile, Premier League clubs will vote on the length of this summer's transfer window on Thursday. FIFA regulations allow up to 16 weeks across 2 registration periods. The first window, traditionally held in the summer, must not exceed 12 weeks. In the Championship tonight, Brentford will move to within 2 points of the automatic promotion places if they beat Charlton. Fulham and Nottingham Forest, who are 4th and 5th respectively, can also put pressure on the leading pack if they come out on top of their clash at the City Ground. At the other end of the table then, bottom side Luton host second bottom Barnsley as they both search for crucial points in their fight against relegation. Huddersfield can take themselves 5 points clear of the bottom 3 with a win at Reading, while Blackburn Rovers travel to Cardiff City. To Golf Matters, Paul McGinley has questioned the sustainability of Bryson DeChambeau's big hitting game. The American, of course, won the Rocket Mortgage Classic at the weekend in Detroit, helped by setting a new average driving distance of just 350 yards. Former European Ryder Cup captain McGinley says DeChambeau will face a tough challenge at the PGA Championship next month. You can read McGinley's full thoughts from last night's show on OTBsports.com, or indeed the new OTB Sports app, which you can download for free on the App Store or the Play Store. Patrick Mahomes has agreed a record 10-year contract extension with the Kansas City Chiefs through to the 2031 season. The extension is worth $503 million, according to the Stars agency, making it the biggest in sports history. The Chiefs awarded Mahomes after he led the franchise to its first Super Bowl title in 50 years. Rugby League's Super League will return next month, but with the suspension of scrums. The move has been made to protect players and avoid long periods of direct contact. The 6 again rule will also be introduced, meaning the attacking team is given 6 more chances to play the ball if the opposition makes an infringement in the ruck. There's a 7-race card at Roscommon this afternoon, lads, with the first off at 1 o'clock. Meanwhile, at Killarney, an 8-race programme gets underway at 4:25. And finally for me this morning, Oxford will meet Wycombe at Wembley next Monday. That's in the League One playoff final. Carl Robinson's Wycombe beat Portsmouth on penalties last night after their semi-final finished 2-2 over 2 legs. In fact, it was Oxford winning that game. Wycombe securing their chance to win a place in the Championship with a 6-3 aggregate win over Joey Barton's Fleetwood.
$1 million for that, Shane. 22 minutes past 8 here this morning on OTB AM. Coming up, we're going to be speaking with Martin Lipton about Spurs. We're going to get into the sports pages, rugby with Ronan O'Gara, talking Patrick Mahomes' new contract at around about 9:10 this morning, and from 9:30 talking Bryson DeChambeau and a bit about Liverpool with Nathan Murphy, our Premier League commentator. First though, let's talk about Spurs and Jose Mourinho. I'm delighted to say Martin Lipton is with us. Good morning, Martin. How you doing?
I'm very well, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, good, thanks. Very interested to see how this Spurs experiment is playing out, and so far you'd have to say that Jose Mourinho is doing very Jose Mourinho things at Spurs. What's your assessment of how much progress he's made?
It's difficult to say how much progress has been made because there hasn't been a great deal, but nor has it gone backwards. I mean, if you look at where he came in, they were 12 points behind fourth. Now they're 7 points behind fourth, so you could argue there's been an improvement there. He played 3 months without his main striker, most of that period without Son and Sissoko as well. So yes, there have been reasons and explanations, but they haven't looked convincing. They haven't defended particularly well. That's a lie. They haven't defended at all well. They are lacking pace, and they are still, as a club, suffering from, well, I would argue, the 2018 World Cup, which was the biggest problem that Tottenham have faced, because when they needed to make significant changes, the players they wanted out, they couldn't sell because they weren't around. And that was the first year of the short window when it shut in the 8th or 10th of August. And those players were still basically on holiday at that point because they'd just come back from the World Cup. So those factors were huge and ignored and missed at the time. But I think Mourinho and Tottenham are still suffering from what happened 2 summers ago.
How do they fix that?
They get rid of some of the players and they start all over again. And that's a problem because, as we know, finances are much tighter than they were. But we're going to get a change in some degree. We're going to see Vertonghen go. He's one of those who has served the club extremely well, but his time is now up. They need pace at the back. They need a new right back. They need a new left back. They need a dominant centre half, and they need a proper holding midfielder. If they get all of those, then there'll be a significantly better team. But easy prescription, harder to actually write it out and get the stuff delivered.
Why weren't those issues that didn't go addressed in 2018 not addressed in the summer of 2019? And if Daniel Levy knew that those problems existed and it was personnel problems that needed to be existed, why wasn't Mauricio Pochettino trusted to be the man to start from the beginning once again?
Because Pochettino has to hold some responsibility for it as well. And why did he not? Why did he actually want to quit last summer? Because he knew that team was shot to bits. He was going to make a significant change last summer, which was overdue. In the end, they didn't really do it, did they? They didn't strengthen at the back. They brought in Ndombele, who has been a ghost figure, it's fair to say, most of this season. It's a compound series of mistakes, and all of those who hold the decision-making positions over the last few years. And I actually accept Mourinho from that, because he really wasn't involved. I mean, January winners are always tough anyhow, so he's not to blame for that. They must take responsibility for it. Collectively, that's Pochettino and Steve Hitchens and Levy.
What's Steve Hitchens' role? Is he the director of football?
He was director of football, yeah.
Right, and so I always wonder exactly who is making the decisions about what type of player, what's the profile of player, how much influence the manager has. Was that an issue with Pochettino? Did he have enough influence? Did he have too much influence? Do we know what that balance of power is?
Look, clearly Pochettino had a huge amount of influence. And let's be fair, he built Spurs from a team that used to aspire to 10th to one that aspired to winning the title. He did a fantastic job. And if anything, he was just a little bit too loyal to players he probably should have discarded. Look, one thing I would say is there's no point in moaning about it now and wondering about it. It's like what happens next is more relevant and pertinent, and that will be difficult because of the tightened financial straits that every club is in. But every club is in those straits. For Spurs, it's been slightly heightened by the fact that they were, they looked to make £5 to £6 million per home match. At the best, they're going to end up missing 6 home matches. It could be more than that. Fans returning in September would have a huge impact on Tottenham, bigger than most clubs, because of that high number. But they're not going to be in the Champions League. They're probably not going to be in Europe, which, if they're not in Europe, that's an 80 million hole in income. If they're not in the Champions League, it's just a 50 million hole in income. They're going to have less money from finishing further down the league. So they have been severely struck by a poor season in one of the worst years. However, on the flip side, they are fundamentally a very sound business. They have the lowest wages to turnover percentile in the Premier League, probably in major football, in the Big Five, because they're so well run financially that, yes, this will be a short-term issue, and they have this £175 million loan from the Bank of England to repay at the most ludicrously low rates you'll know. So it actually costs them $800,000, which I think they can swallow. They come back stronger, but they will take a hit.
Is Jose Mourinho the right man to steer the ship through this period of time? Because in the past he's been notoriously tetchy when it comes to not getting money to invest in the team.
Yes, and that's why I've been extremely surprised by the way he's behaved. I thought by now, given what's gone on, it would have been, worries me, it's a disgrace, the chairman's not doing his job properly, Waitrose, eggs, all that sort of stuff. We haven't heard that, actually. He's been remarkably well behaved. And when his issues are with a couple of players, clearly Ndombele is one of them, but I don't think too many fans have got much faith in Ndombele, given that he didn't perform at any point this season, and he's never been fit. He doesn't seem to want to play. I think he's been extremely well behaved. I don't think he's got enough success out of the defence, but then again, they're not quick enough, and I don't think you can't inject, well, unless you're a Russian doctor from the 1990s, you can't inject pace into people, and therein lies the issue. I think he's got to sort that out. If he gets a proper right back with pace, a commanding centre half, a decent holding midfielder, and a left back, now whether he does that I don't know, suddenly they look a completely different team. Is he the right man? I don't think anyone can tell you, because we haven't really seen enough. But it will have to be next season. Again, whatever happens this summer, next season, he will be judged by that performance, irrespective of whether it's fair or not. That's the way it works.
The Ndombele situation is interesting, Martin. You look at some of the clubs he's been linked with. Paris Saint-Germain, apparently his most likely suitor if he were to leave this summer. Barcelona potentially interested in him as well. And when you see reports coming out from inside the squad, when you talk about some of the most talented players within that Tottenham squad, apparently Ndombele is right up there. But you're saying that perhaps the player needs to take far more responsibility for what has gone wrong for him so far at Tottenham Hotspur, rather than pointing the finger immediately at Jose Mourinho.
It's 2 managers, it's 10 months, he hasn't done it. How many times has he played well? Be honest, how many times has he played well? Maybe once, maybe twice. He's not made himself fit. He's never fit. It's ridiculous. And I'm sorry, I know there's issues. There was, when told from France there was this problem and that problem, it was undiagnosed. Well, start telling people there's a problem. Stop looking for excuses. Sometimes take responsibility. You're a grown man. You're 22, 23. You're on getting paid, 150, 200 grand a week. Show a bit. Maybe it'll be great. He'll go to Barcelona and be brilliant, or go to PSG and be outstanding. Spurs, have sold players and regretted it in the past. They've also sold players and thought they, did the better out of it. I can't see him having any future at Tottenham. The issue is now how much they get back from how much they lose of that 56 million.
We've talked about the financial issues, and the fact that they are well run perhaps means that they'll be able to do some kind of financial wizardry to be able to invest in the team. Is there any prospect that they sell some of their actual prize assets to raise money for reinvestment and decide that this is going to be a period of retrenchment?
It depends what you call the prize asset. I'm not sure that Lucas Moura has a long-term future, personally. I've never quite been sold on him. They paid 25 million for him. They could get some of that back. Is it time for Lamela to go? Maybe. I mean, he's been there for 7 years now. What would they get for him? Maybe 25. They wouldn't get their money back. Who could they sell for money that they can afford to sell? Maybe. And I wouldn't say this is a great move, but maybe you could argue that Dele Alli might be saleable. They can't sell Kane. Absolutely can't. If they sell Kane, the message it sends out is horrendous. It tells everyone they're not interested anymore. So potentially Ali, but wouldn't you want him if you can get him right because he'll score goals? I wouldn't want to lose him. I think it's difficult. They have to find a way. But sometimes you do have to make difficult choices to improve. And you may not, Liverpool fans didn't want to see Coutinho go, but it certainly benefited them in the long term because of the way the money was spent. So if you can identify things that will improve the general mix, you've got to be willing to make those certain sacrifices. Let's see. But if you looked across the squad, you'd probably say that Dele is the one you might get money for, who you might be able to use that money for, and without hugely adversely affecting the team. But then you lose a lot when he goes, if he goes.
In terms of Kane, right, is there any prospect that Mourinho is making the argument about Coutinho and saying, I have a centre-back, a left-back, a right-back, and another striker that I can get for the 150 or 200 million that we'll get for Harry Kane now?
No. If he sells Harry Kane, he doesn't last one defeat before the fans demand his head and that of the chairman, and he knows that.
What if Harry Kane agitates for a move one day?
Well, he will do one day. I don't think he will this summer. But I think if Spurs don't get back into the Champions League and really come close to winning something next season, Kane will want to leave. And I also think that no Spurs fan would really condemn him for wanting to leave. I think that there will be a view that he needs to go one. Kane in himself wants to stay at Tottenham and beat Jimmy Greaves' scoring record. That's 266. Now, that would take a minimum of 2 seasons, probably 2.5 seasons, realistically, if he stays fit and plays well. But if Kane leaves, he's going to score the goals. As simple as that. You've got to find... It's not easy to replace a 25-goal-a-season man. Even this season, when he's supposedly not been playing that well, he has scored, I think, for club and country, 30 goals in 35 games. No. This is in a so-called soft season, a poor season.
Yeah, not bad.
That tells you what sort of player. Now, admittedly, most of those, there's a lot of goals for England in that, 10 in 6. Nevertheless, even for Spurs, he's scoring goals. You know, he's got 13 in the league, and he's got another few in the Champions League, etc. He's a goal scorer. You don't replace them easily.
I know we don't really know yet until we see next season what type of style of play, what type of team, whether or not he can fix the defence, whether or not Mourinho is the right manager. But there is definitely a profile of a manager who would give youth its chance in circumstances like this that you might be, if you were a Spurs fan, more invested in. You might have a bit more faith in a manager who was able to look at the reserve team, look at the youth team and go, okay, I've got players here who can play 10, 15 games a season for me who might become first team regulars over the course of the next 18 months or so. Mourinho's not really that type of manager, or certainly hasn't been in the past. Is there any prospect? Are there any other young players coming through at the moment who might get a chance under this Mourinho administration?
I think if he'd been fit, Pallett would have been involved. But he's not fit. As we know, he's had the operation. They like Sirkin, the young boy who's on the bench last night. Still got to be some sort of faith in Sessegnon for 25 million. They've got a few, but Spurs aren't particularly great at bringing players through from the youth team. You know, and to be honest, if you get one a year, you're doing well for most clubs. It isn't that many, you get more than that. Mourinho knows it's a stick he's beaten with about young players, and I think it's a valid one, or he says otherwise, and he will point to players from Varane onwards, from who he brought through, but he's very good at working out his calculations. I think if Mourinho doesn't work, the next manager will be a very different type of manager, and it will. They were keen on Brendan Rodgers. I think their sights would be trained at Julian Nagelsmann, or even the American chap Marsh at the other Red Bull team in Salzburg, young and progressive, bringing young players through. I think that's what they may well look to do. But they brought in Mourinho for a very different purpose. That was to start winning things, and therefore he'll be judged pretty highly and tightly on whether he does that. That wasn't this season, that's next season. But as we know, next season starts very soon.
Yeah, really, really quickly. Parrott had his appendix out. That was at the end of May. He could be back fairly soon. Will he get some game time before the end of the season, do you think?
If he's fit, he probably will be involved, yeah, because you've got nine players now on the bench. So therefore, there's a chance he'll be on the bench if he's fit. But I don't know the state of the boy. You would probably know more than I. Mourinho likes him. He wasn't sure that he was physically strong enough to play up front. The issue will be whether he goes on loan next season to build up his fitness and match strength, which might be a better shout perhaps, and with less pressure on him than if you're at Spurs, or he stays around. But if they were to buy another striker, he'd be third in the pecking order. You know, does he want that? I don't know. We'll find out. Those conversations will have to take place. If I was having to put 50 pence of your money on it, I think that Parrott will go out on loan to play football next season.
That probably makes sense from his perspective, and also if they can recall him, it makes sense as well from Spurs' perspective.
Oh yeah, you do it till Christmas, a 3-month loan.
Yeah. Do you expect them to have much money this summer?
No, I don't think anyone's got much money this summer, but we don't know because also one of the things is even if you have got money, you want everyone to think you haven't got a penny piece.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you're going to be held up at gunpoint, particularly this summer. So I suspect there's a little bit more than Spurs are saying, but that doesn't mean there's a lot. They'll have to get free transfers in, a couple of the holes. They were very keen on Meunier, who they've missed out on now. That would have been a good signing for the right back. They may have to go and spend, but Norwich's impending relegation means, for example, Aarons becomes more available. Southampton are resigned to losing Højbjerg. The issue is the price. Let's have a little negotiation. Maybe you do a deal involving Carl Walker-Peters staying at Southampton, for example, and that puts the price down by 10 million. Those are the sort of conversations that are likely to take place.
Yeah, OK. Very interesting end of the season, a very interesting transfer window ahead of us. Martin, always great to talk to you. Thanks a million.
No worries, take care. Bye-bye.
Martin Lipton there from the Sun talking to us this morning at 8:40 here on OTBAM. I want to tell you about our brilliant new game show, which is live every Friday afternoon. This week it is at the slightly later time of 1 o'clock. We're going to be giving you another chance to win a grand in cold hard cash. It's our new game show here on OTB Sports called Know Your Football. It's, that's what it says in the tin. You need to know your football. It's 15 questions. Last week, only one person got all 15 questions right, and so they made off with €1,000 all on their own. The previous week, we had a rollover, and 4 people shared in £2,000 in prize money. So they got 500 quid each. You can do your maths. Well done. You can register at the following link, quiz.otbsports.com. That's quiz.otbsports.com. You just make sure that you're online at 1 o'clock or 5 to 1 ideally, so you've got time to sign up and make sure that the window's working for you. Quiz.otbsports.com. We'll be on air from about 1:45 to 1 and 20 to 1 talking about the week's football stories and building up a little bit of tension, and then we'll be going through the questions one by one. You get 10 seconds to answer. You've got to answer really quickly because we don't want anybody having time to Google the answers. Know Your Football is brought to you in association with Paddy Power. Check out paddypower.com for their great offers, and always gamble responsibly. Time for the papers.
OTB AM.
We'll start with OTBsports.com. Declan Rice to Manchester United just feels right. That's Pat and Evan talking about Declan Rice's future on the show last night. They did just give Nemanja Matic a new deal, so would it be 2 players playing in the same position? It's a very Man United thing, I suppose, to do. He's reinvented a lot of things. Paul McGinley talking about Bryson DeChambeau's win in very technical terms about how the ball explodes off the club face. So a little bit of science for you there. Patrick Mahomes' success manifests itself in moments. Patrick Mahomes is the new Michael Jordan. We've been saying this on the snap for quite a while, but he is the first athlete, I think, who has had the potential to be as dominant in his sport as Michael Jordan has been. And then a commentary I'll never get sick of hearing, Emmett McNamara talking about winning the English Derby at the weekend in remarkable fashion. Was on the show last night for you as well. Where are you going on?
The Irish Examiner this morning leads with John Fogarty's piece with John Shagru. Players at risk of falling between club and county, he says. This is in relation to, obviously, everything that's going on at the moment in the GEA. The match report from last night at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. Grim stuff, says the headline, but Spurs still in European hunt, with a photo of Dominic Calvert-Lewin flailing through the air as Ben Davies tackles him. County managers want clarity on training rules. There's another piece from John Fogarty here, where a number of county managers are seeking clarification from the GEA via their boards about what they can do with players before September 14th. So collective training, does that mean gym sessions, collective gym sessions, meetings, talking about tactics, walkthroughs? They want clarity on what that includes. And Arteta eager to keep hold of really important Ceballos. Of course, he's on loan at the club this year, started to come into a bit of form over the last couple of weeks, and it is Arsenal against Leicester tonight at 8:15.
The Irish Independent back page for you there. Let players go back and be clubmen, urges Boylan. So a Sean Boylan interview where he's wide-ranging, talking about lockdown, what it's been like for him as well, and talking about the need for us all to sit and take stock. Haven't we all been stopped in our tracks? Everybody's been completely stopped in their tracks, and it's time for a total assessment. It's time for total fair play. This is exactly the conversation we've been having over the last couple of months, is let's take this opportunity to put out a vision for what's coming next. And instead we've had this club versus county row and various bits of backtracking about whether or not anybody's going to end up being punished for breaching rules. And there's actually a good piece in The Independent, which we'll get to at the end of this. Declan Bogue was writing about how ultimately you're going to have to report on your own club member. That's what's going to happen here. You're going to have to report on your own club member not being given access to train with you. Like, who's going to do that? How is that going to happen? Like, is it going to happen?
No chance. Like 0% that happens in most cases, to be honest. Like, we were having this conversation yesterday. What is the alternative? Like, the entire culture of the GEA and rule breaking has been kind of based on the nod and the wink and trying to do things in a sly way sometimes. And the only way you can get around that is by actually calling people out and things. So, in a weird way, what Tom Ryan said last Friday week about calling people out is still the truth. You will still need people to be pointing fingers and actually publicly putting their head above the parapet when it comes to this sort of thing. The London Times this morning leads with Martin Ziegler's piece here that stars can kneel for anthem. So this is in relation to the FA Cup coming up, where the national anthem will be played. the Football Association giving players the green light to take a knee before those games during the anthem. Meanwhile, more terrible news from the RFU. They're set to lose 139 jobs, writes Alex Lowe. So they're proposing to cut its staff by 139, nearly a quarter of its 580 employees. So this is part of a process where their losses could be up to £107 million. The RFU, one of the worst affected sporting organisations in the world, really, by COVID-19. And GB gymnasts were abused. So this is rather grim developments from an ITV News investigation where top British gymnasts have claimed that they suffered serious physical and emotional abuse by coaches in a string of allegations in that programme last night. So that is the London Times.
The Irish Times this morning. Spurs hold nerve after Keane deflects victory their way, and they also have Rodgers confident. So it's match preview and review on that page. And then following up on yesterday's story, John O'Sullivan has obviously spoken to somebody within the IRFU. Pandemic's implications will delay completion of $450 million deal is the story here. So obviously we had reports from France that Bernard Laporte was saying it looks like a deal will be done in the next 2 months. The Six Nations Tournament Committee is in charge of the file. They just made a counter-proposal last week about CBC. In the first discussion, there was talk of $79 million over 5 years. With the renegotiation, it'll be closer to $75 million, but this represents a substantial sum. That was what was reported yesterday in the papers coming from France. But somebody has, in Irish Rugby, has given John O'Sullivan a sense that the timeframe may be longer than the one outlined by Bernard Laporte, and that actually there, it might take a little bit longer for this whole thing to happen. And he's also talking here about CBC and the desire that they'll have to put matches behind a paywall, which is the lead story on the back of the Mail this morning. Obviously, the Six Nations is not a protected tournament, and as a result, it could go behind a paywall if it was required to do so, or if the Six Nations decided that's what they wanted.
The Irish Daily Star this morning leads with the headline, Law and Peace. Tottenham seeing their players go to war at half-time and then making up with it with a big hug after the game. Curtis Jones, meanwhile, says we are the greatest cop side. The youngsters saying that they're the best Liverpool side ever. Ring, the king of hurling. Micheál Murhurt is interviewed in the Irish Daily Star today to chat about Christy Ring, who would have been 100 today. And League's director on cards. The new SSE Electricity League director could be known by next week, because interviews were held for the post yesterday. So Paul Lennon's writing this piece, and it's not clear whether Niall Quinn has gone for that job or the commercial director's role, with which he has also been linked. So these two posts, and those of Grassroots Director and Chief Operations Officer, were last month advertised internally, with interviews held yesterday for the four roles. So there's going to be a few new appointments next week in the FAI.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see exactly what happens there for that one. So the Mirror, their headline, which I think is tab of the morning to you, is Hugo Bosch better than Law and Peace?
100%. Fantastic.
And then they also have the Irish Mirror here has Old Firm date is fanfare. Neil Lennon believes the opening Old Firm showdown of the season can be boosted by fans inside Parkhead. So October 17th. He's hopeful of there being fans there. We don't deserve to be in the Prem. That's Bournemouth striker Joshua King. And Hoops face problem with trip to France. Shamrock Rovers are anxiously waiting to find out whether they can still fly to play Paris Saint-Germain in a glamour friendly. It seems unlikely at the moment, the way things are going. Non-essential travel is now not advised before July 20th. This game's supposed to be on the 17th of July. Is it essential that Shamrock Rovers go over to Paris to play PSG in a friendly? I mean, it might be essential from a business perspective.
I mean, what is essential? Essential is all how you view it, is it not? I'm sure that possibly is in a bit of danger.
It's fairly obvious that this isn't essential.
It's not going to go ahead. If it's not going to go ahead, I would dare say. The Irish Sun throwing their hat in the ring for tab of the morning to you as well. Law and disorder. Skipper Hugo and Sons bust up. We've got Anthony Joshua as well saying we need sport union on racism. Rovers get the abuse, but issue runs deeper. Writes Neil O'Riordan this morning. And King's no good rap. Josh King has launched a scathing attack on Bournemouth and said we don't deserve to be in the Premier League, and cut price Canaries. As we've kind of touched on this morning with Martin Lipton, Norwich players will see their wages cut by half after relegation from the Premier League. But I suppose Lipton is more talking about the fact that their price tag could be cut in half, and a few of their players might be up for grabs a bit easier than they would be if they stayed up. So that is the Irish Sun this morning.
The Irish Daily Mail, their back page is charged down. Six Nations in move towards pay-per-view and scrappy Spurs. And then also Top Flight want FA Cup ties moved to midweek. So midweek under lights, not the worst thing. It's one of the reasons why we all love the League Cup. So the Six Nations edging closer to moving behind a paywall. There's one more season left. The 2021 season might be the last free-to-air one if CBC get their way.
The Guardian this morning leads with a photograph from Spurs celebrating after their winning goal last night. Bust-up fails to blunt Spurs. Lloris and Son almost came to blows at half-time, but the pair made up and helped Tottenham ease to victory over a toothless Everton side. The other story here is about rugby's financial wreckage. Sweeney warns of long fallout from virus, with 139 jobs at risk. So that is the Guardian this morning.
The Telegraph, their lead story is LTA accused over old boys club culture. The Lawn Tennis Association has been hit by a spate of departures among senior women as an investigation by the Daily Telegraph reveals long-standing allegations of chauvinism in the organisation. Fairly horrific details there of stuff that's been going on in the LTA. I just wanted to very quickly talk about a story that was in the Telegraph here. This is Blackburn and Northern Ireland international Corey Evans. And I don't know if you can see, so the picture of the skull there in the middle of the page, it should be flat and it should be kind of, relatively smooth, but all of the bits that you can see are screws in his head from where he took a kick. And the line that stuck out, which they helpfully put in a drop quote, the surgeon likened it to being hit in the face with a hammer or a baseball bat. I was lucky, a bit further in and I could have had brain damage, so it was just an accidental boot to the face. But he now has a bunch of screws, a maze of screws, which has been used to keep his forehead in place. And like there's splints in his nose, and there's loads of staples in his head. And came back a couple of weeks ago and scored on his return to play and was man of the match. It's an unbelievable story. His kids didn't recognise him when he got home.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Can he head the ball?
He can head the ball, and you know what? He said that actually everybody asking him the whole time, can you head the ball, made him really nervous about it. It was like, are you nervous? Are you nervous? Are you nervous? No, I wasn't until you asked me, but I am now. It was like, yeah, I can't head the ball. He can't head the ball, and he's fine. So, and a remarkable story about the powers of modern science.
Absolutely. The Racing Post this morning, and the front page goes with Love Match. O'Brien eyes arc tussle with Enable for his very special Oaks heroine. Golden Horde leads Classic Generation into first battle with Elders in July Cup, and they've got a stable tour special inside the newspaper as well. The headline Summer Jumpers, and then on the back of the Racing Post this morning, the headline reads Outfoxed. Gunners may come up short against Wiley Leicester. It's an 8:15 kick-off at the Emirates Stadium tonight.
It's a decent game to look forward to, right? Like two teams playing reasonable football at the moment, and both sides with enough frailties should make you think this should be a 2-2 draw.
It should be, yeah. There could be, or else Leicester will just show up and smash them 3-0. Like, I mean, there is the needle is getting ever closer to that balloon that is inflating for Arsenal. Like, I think in general, the two things tend to move at like a similar pace, the inflation of the balloon and the speed at which the needle moves towards it. So it's coming any day now. They've got some tough fixtures. They're playing Liverpool soon. They're playing City soon. Like, that is definitely going to be kind of a samurai sword to the balloon when all hopes and dreams will be crushed forever. But it could be tonight. I'm not ruling out tonight for Arsenal to be put back into their place and be shown up for the shambles that they possibly still are.
Where did the balloon metaphor come out of?
I don't know. I was trying to think of bursting a bubble, and then I came up with the word balloon instead of bubble. But, you know, we live and we learn.
The Herald, time for GAA to play fair. This is a call from Sean Boylan. Boylan calls for total rethink on calendar, and Klopp do a Fergie with Poole. You kind of feel like yes is the answer at the moment. City and United in battle for defenders. So Manchester United and Manchester City are set to fight it out for centre halves this summer. Both interested in Koulibaly, and Inter's Skriniar. And so there's a bunch of others there as well. It depends on whether or not Man City are going to have their Court of Arbitration for Sport ban upheld or not. If that court upholds the ban, then they will be less likely to invest in players, apparently. But we'll see. When is that going to happen? When is the date for that actually happening?
It's this month sometime.
Right, it would need to happen pretty quickly, wouldn't it?
Yeah, like it's in everybody's interest for them to come up with a decision. You would have thought that, having heard the evidence, it would have taken them only a couple of days to do so. But they've given themselves until now, so it's a huge piece of news. It's going to be one of the biggest stories for British football, especially when it comes to the 5th place spot in the Premier League and where certain parts around Europe are going to end up after the transfer window closes. Right, at 8:55 this morning, let's take a quick look at what's on the OTB Sports app. Reminder, to find the app, just search for OTB Sports. That's OTB Sports in the Google Play Store or in the App Store. And when you log on, you decide what your feed is going to be, depending on which sports you've liked. When you sign up and personalise it, you can get our latest videos. You can see the latest podcasts. Every single podcast that we upload gets uploaded to the app first. And after that as well, there's the rest of the stories that we're working on at the moment. You can listen to radio full-time, non-stop, 24 hours a day, which is all of our live shows. So Monday Night Rugby, Wednesday Night Rugby, whenever that goes live. And then, of course, the live shows in the morning and the evening. And then all of our podcasts are there for you to subscribe to as well on the podcast section. And we ping you a little notification. If you sign up for our notifications, which I'd recommend you do, then as soon as we go live with any of that stuff, you'll know about it first. So that is in the radio section, for example, right now, today from 12 o'clock, the very latest episode of Alan Quinlan's How's the Head. The Corona's lead singer, Danny O'Reilly, joins Alan. This is an exclusive first listen on the OTB Sports app from 12 o'clock today. Ronan O'Gara is going to join us next this Tuesday morning here on OTB AM. If you have any questions for Ronan, 0879 180 180 is the WhatsApp number. OTB AM is brought to you by Gillette. We don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made of what matters. Ronan O'Gara, good morning to you. How you doing?
Hi, Ger. How are you?
There's a lot of stuff going on in World Rugby at the moment in terms of conversations about rule changes. In particular, the one that we wanted to get your opinion on first was the number of replacements perhaps going from 8 down to 5. They're talking about trialling this and has heavyweight support at the top level of the game. So those things that tend to get trialled, sometimes they can be a shoe-in. What's your take? Would that be good or bad for the game?
Well, it's big news, first of all. I only heard about it yesterday. I tried to process the information yesterday, and there's massive implications to how you create a squad or your team and your finishers and how you start the game. So it would have big implications. So yeah, it's obviously an area that I need to get up to speed on very quickly, and I am aware of, are there within the rules of that, are there certain front row numbers you have to hit targets on, or are we aware of that at the minute?
I think they're trying to work out all those details, and I think it's even to be worked out whether or not you'll still be able to have your 8 players on the bench and only use 5 of them, but then if there's a front row emergency, you get an extra kind of almost like a blood sub. I think those details are still being worked out.
Yeah, and then I just haven't spent a little bit of time on the bench for the latter stage of my career. It's hugely unfulfilling if you don't get game time. Even 2 minutes, I think you get to release those emotions, and it could create an awful lot more problems. The fact that if you have guys that are unused substitutes, if that happens for a number of weeks, I think some of them nearly prefer to be playing on the second team or having an idea of when they will get game time, because the reality is all the players need game time, and if you're 5 of those 8 are only allowed to take to the pitch, it will be challenging, but that's something you have to manage. I can understand. Obviously, there's been a massive dependency on experts on tight heads and loose heads and hookers, so that's 3 automatically gone. No, we might go back to where it was 10 years ago. We had guys that are equally efficient in playing both sides of the scrum, and you'd think of a fella like Andrew McAleo of the Crusaders, who could play probably 3 positions. He becomes extra valuable then. So, if you have a guy that can play tight head, loose head and hooker, he's a banker for the start on the bench, isn't he?
He's getting rich.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, exactly. But, like a lot of players are capable of playing second row and number 6 or number 8, not really number 7. But you have to be very crafty in how you come create it. But I think at 8, sometimes a lot of teams are going 6 and 2.
Yeah.
In terms of, and then it's like being able to replace nearly your whole forward pack, and it doesn't create mismatches after the 66th minute. You have guys just as good, particularly at test level, that have come in, and an awful lot of coaches now are watching live GPS to kind of go, okay, this guy is waning, take him off. And I know a number of coaches over the years, especially when we were players, that were looking to see where those markers being made, and if they were metres per minute not being hit, you might call to the bench. While I also felt sometimes there was great kind of interest or appreciation for a feel for a game and a flow to a game in terms of, okay, just because this guy's had an error, let him off and see how he goes, and then hopefully he regains confidence and then he comes good again. But, they're managing challenging topic for rugby, especially with the physicality. The more substitutes, the more changes you can make. You're going to be just probably keep feeding the monster physicality if you have that idea of less subs that can take the pitch. Hopefully, if you have a good pace to the game and ball and play for a number of minutes, people will tire and you might see a more attacking brand of the game.
We had Dr. James Robson on Keith Wood's State of the Union last week, and he was saying, he's got 40 odd years of being a Scotland doctor and a Lions doctor, and he'd like to see the game going back to being a game where players try and run around each other as opposed to running through each other. And I suppose the game is desperately trying to get back to a point where it isn't just feeding the monster and it isn't just big beasts killing each other the whole time, where more craft and more guile is coming into it. I mean, does this automatically help with that? Is it a small step along the way? How much help would this be?
Well, I think a lot of that too is mindset of the coaches. You look at just the last World Cup, probably the big two winners were Colby and Japan, and none of them are monsters by any means. And I think the speed of the brain will always breed the physicality. So that's a really positive for guys that are small in stature. I think the speed of thought is the most important thing. But honestly, at times you felt in the past watching, sometimes a big example would be if, an awful lot of 12s were picked because they were very physical players and it was about winning the gain line. But there's other ways of winning the gain line as well. I think it's all about identifying space and getting into space. But I genuinely haven't had enough time to process this new rule, because it's a big call, because so much is at stake in terms of how you kind of, like, an awful lot of players think you start with your best team, and an awful lot of coaches don't think like that. They kind of go, okay, I might actually try and finish better when there's tired bodies after 50 odd minutes, and there definitely will be an advantage, I would think, if you can only have less subs on the pitch.
Ronan, can I ask, when you were playing, did you find later in the game that your ability to unlock a defence with the boot just increased by so much? I guess even if you go back 10 years, you wouldn't necessarily...
I was able to unlock with the hand as well.
Sorry, say that again?
Sorry, I interrupted you. I was able to unlock the defence with the ball in hand as well, Eoin. You've too much time in Kerry.
Because I was just making the point that if you go back 10 years, people weren't necessarily running the entire bench, that it was up to you to kind of figure it out, that perhaps in a little bit of a different way. I'm not sure what you think about that.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I definitely think that, especially when teams, as I said, the Jurgo 6-2, you have fresh people everywhere. You know what I mean? The beauty of the game, probably when there was less substitutes, going back a number of years, was there was definitely a fatigue element, and it became apparent among coaches at the time. If you do this on the first, second and third phase, on the fourth and fifth phase, you might find the tight head and the loose head together in midfield, and that's an area to go after, and that's just smart coaching. And naturally, because props are so valuable in the game, because if we diminish the scrum, it's going to become rugby league. We cannot do that. So you need all shapes and sizes, and you need great scrummagers in the game, and that's why the scrum, even though it wrecks everyone's head how long it takes sometimes with collapse scrums and reset scrums, but if you don't value a scrum or a scrummager who can manipulate his opposition and gain 3 points for his team, then the game has changed already. So I think, coming back to your question, yes, I did feel that, and I think that is important, that there is that emphasis on trying to have high intensity in the game and keeping it for as long as you can, that you will sometimes run teams off their feet.
Are we seeing over the last 18 months more responsibility given to whoever is the playmaker, generally the out half, but sometimes there's a second playmaker in some teams as well, to try and beat these mass defences, that actually the game is evolving, and it'd be interesting to see exactly what happens with that evolution, that there are fewer teams going to just rely on brute strength, that we are actually asking the out halves to be more clever.
You're right, Jeremy, and it probably, we have underappreciated how England have changed, I think, the way the game is played as well. I think they didn't get the result against South Africa, but I think there probably would have been overreaction if they did in that regard, because they play really, really good rugby. But so much of their emphasis is pushing the ball through along the ground, identifying that a lot of teams have only one person in the backfield, so identifying where the space is. Sometimes you don't have to run into space, you can push the ball into space. So with their kind of multiple kick threats in terms of Favre, Ford, Elliott Daly, Slade, Johnny May is good at it. They're very, very adept at finding space, and then they just actually increase their kind of, I suppose, defensive mindset in the right areas of the pitch for opposition to come up with errors when they're put under high pressure and put more in the front line. So in that regard, they're kind of they're manipulating teams into trying to run against them, while England are actually probably the best attacking, kicking team in the world. And you look at probably the massive change in the game in the Aotearoa set up at the minute has been the amount of times our New Zealand teams are kicking the ball in attacking positions. They're happy with actually 17-metre games.
Which is funny, because that's kind of what Joe Schmidt's Ireland were doing in 2017 and 2018 when they were at their best, and they got a lot of criticism for...
Yeah, it's unbelievable. It all comes full circle. I've kind of been watching it going, wow, this is massive. And I would say in the first 3 weeks of this competition, they've attempted more drop goals than they have in the last 10 years.
Why is that?
I don't know. I think actually it's there's a big fascination, I think, over there probably be playing a Northern Hemisphere type of game in terms of when the weather comes in, when it's not conducive to playing good rugby, because you got to remember now it's obviously the depths of winter over there, so they're able to play a summer game and a winter game. But I think they've always probably been admirers of the way the game is played over here, but also realistic that they can't be the handling. And with the way the World Cup went for them and they got the way it got dismantled by England, I would say there's a lot of studies of the English game, and England's attacking kicking game is better than anyone else's in the world at the minute.
And is this stuff that we are actually naturally good at, and so that trend is kind of in our favour in some ways at the moment?
Well, exactly, it is, but then I think what we need to, or probably where we would be a little bit behind, would be the skill set of the front five, the ball handling, the straight line running. So the New Zealand front five have that, but they don't have the kind of natural kicking game that we would have over here. So they're obviously working hard on their weaknesses. And I think for Irish rugby, it'd be very interesting to see just the development in terms of the catch pass and hits upfield areas like that, where that would add another layer to our attacking game.
What are we doing to improve the handling of our front five?
I actually not too sure of the actual specifics of them, but I presume it's repped every day in training. Every team really does catch pass now. But, it's an area that, even though it's very simple skill, there's a lot of areas where it can become a waste of time if it's not practiced correctly. So a lot of people drift on a pass without them realising, and they think they're actually running straight, but you actually have to kind of go through them on a video and say, okay, the great thing about it is we know the video doesn't lie, so they may think that you're lying, but actually, when you watch the video and say, okay, that line hasn't moved, but you've moved, so has the line moved or have you moved? So in that regard, it's but like everything, it takes a little bit to start, but then if you persist with it, you can get it. But because it's a simple skill, people think it's not important, but it's the Dan Carter philosophy: do the simple things well over and over again.
It certainly worked for him. We had Andy Friend on last night talking about how lockdown has been an opportunity for his whole coaching staff to revisit all sorts of things, from the simple day of the week off that they used to have. They're going to change that to post-match, the day after matches, instead of getting everybody to come into training for a video session. They're going to do those video sessions on Zoom now to give people more time with their family at home. Have you gone through any of that stuff just yet? Are you having those conversations with your own backroom team and your players?
I kind of have them myself, to be honest. Sure, I think, as I said, maybe not in this programme, but maybe to myself, I think if I'm not right, how can I expect the management and the players to be right? So it's been a brilliant opportunity to get better the last 4 months, and the big learning from it would be there's no need to be in the office at 6 o'clock, I don't think. Breakfast with the kids and bringing them to school is very important, as opposed to them thinking that you spent the night in a hotel, which is kind of relinked to your days as a player. So if you're organised, 8 to 4 o'clock is adequate time to get things done, because you can be chasing it, and that's what I was doing basically for 15 years till got this opportunity and forced to reassess completely everything, and it has turned itself out. But I think ultimately, personally speaking, incredibly for the better for me.
As a better person, as opposed to just being a better coach?
Yeah, well, I think it probably feeds into both. And plenty of time to ask yourself why. Why am I doing this? What do I want out of this? Why am I doing this? Some of those questions are hard. So you have to be absolutely convinced if you want to do this career. And I think I know my answer now, so I can kind of attack it with fresh gusto. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think everybody's kind of. Here's the thing: not everybody and not all sports are actually examining why we do things and how we do things, but some sports are, and certainly within sports, individuals are. And I think it's going to be very interesting to see what wrinkles come out of this period of time. Just the creativity, we all know through human history. Massive periods of change have come after big crises like this, and so it's going to be very interesting to see what happens. When are you guys back playing? What's the return to play like? So we've had a good 3 weeks. This is a week off this week. So we've had 3 weeks kind of really soft of a pre-season. Obviously planned, I think, but more so in the fact of with the financial implications, we're kind of on chômage, so we're partial chômage. We're allowed kind of 2 or 3 hours in the building a day. So our performance team have come up with a good plan, I think, having looked at the Bundesliga and the NRL with the amount of spike in injury. So a lot of teams have gone back too hard too soon. So we've kind of set up a project, well, not a project, but a plan where it's kind of, we're going to go attack our pre-season on the 13th of July. So 3 weeks of a kind of a lead into that, where nothing is at anywhere near max, and then a week off, and then go hard on the 13th.
And games at the start of August, is that right?
No, not start of August, end of August.
End of August.
Yeah, and first competition game on the 5th of February, all over the which I'm in Biarritz this week, and it's they're very cautious over here. Everyone wearing masks, which is good to see, and I think there's good signs, I think, for obviously to respect how serious the virus is. So hopefully there won't be a second wave in France, because if there is, it'll be post-Christmas or post-January, and we're going to lose rugby clubs if that's the case. Yeah, absolutely. Great surf in Biarritz, apparently. Are you hanging 10? No, I can't do it. I actually tried to go in for a swim yesterday. She's got demolished by the wave. So I'm a little bit cautious today.
A little bit of bodyboarding.
Good watching. Good to watch. You know, they've no respect for bodyboards. They're not allowed. No. Whistled off. Out of the water.
You can blame the kids. I'm just looking after them. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, there's no fear.
Well, listen, enjoy your holiday. Good stuff. Thanks a million.
Great chat, guys. See you, George. See you on.
Ronan O'Gara there giving us some thoughts from sunny Biarritz, where it's good to hear they're all wearing masks. 0879 180 180 is the number you can WhatsApp us on. You can leave a comment with the hashtag OTBAM on Twitter and we'll get to it. Mike Carson standing by. We'll talk to him next.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
Football is back.
Aguero makes it 3. Chelsea switch off at the back.
Like the rest of us returning to work, the Premier League is also back. Keep up to date with the latest scores on the OTB Sports app. Live updates and analysis of this summer's Premier League action. The OTB Sports app. Live score updates straight to your phone.
Missing this?
Salah takes the shot. Oh, Mo Salah with one of the goals of the season. Unbelievable.
Then get this. The all-new OTB Sports app. Off the Ball, Ireland's premier sports channel, now has a new home, featuring the biggest names in Irish and world sports. Podcasts, interviews, news, commentary, analysis, plus almost 20 years of sporting archives. All free and ready when you are, at home or on the go. The new OTB Sports app. Download it now from the App Store and Google Play.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, we don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made of what matters.
Right, time for us to turn our attention to the NFL, where Patrick Mahomes has, in the last 24 hours, agreed a life-changing contract with the Kansas City Chiefs. Mike Carlson is with us this morning. Mike, there was never really a question about Patrick Mahomes becoming the richest American footballer in history. It was kind of the scale of the deal that we were hanging out to see that the Kansas City Chiefs would do with Mahomes, and it turns out it's a big one.
Big is the word for it. You know, we were thinking, since the biggest deal before had been Andrew Luck's, which was a total of about $140 million, everyone was figuring that Mahomes was going to come in somewhere in the 200 million range, and you would have thought that would have been at around 5 years. But I think more important than the size, the overall size of the contract, is the length of it. A 10-year deal in the NFL is incredible. It's the kind of thing you get every now and again in baseball, but not many other places. You know, Mike Trout's got a 10-year deal for about four and a quarter, as you'd say. And Alex Rodriguez years ago busted the bank with a 10-year deal for $25 million. And 10-year deals that are fully guaranteed are really dangerous. And an awful lot of Mahomes' deal is fully guaranteed, will be guaranteed.
That's the thing here, isn't it? Somebody pointed out that it was exactly 10 years ago that Sam Bradford was signing his rookie contract, and you think, well, quite a lot has changed in the game since then, and quite a lot's going to change over the next 10 years. But essentially, they wanted to show some level of commitment to Patrick Mahomes that turned him into that paid due deference to the superstar that he has become.
I think that's exactly right. And what's especially instructive here is the way that Andy Reid and Mahomes work together. I think Reid thinks he's found the perfect quarterback for the kind of offense that he wants to run. He keeps adding pieces for him, versatile, very fast downfield pieces that he can use to play at all the different levels offensively, knowing Mahomes has this innate ability to see things on different levels, to keep plays alive and see downfield, and most amazing arm. That it's not the strength of the arm, it's his ability to get good throws off from almost any position, off balance, underhand, backwards, whatever. So they're a great fit. And looking at the problem, of course, with stories like that is that everybody rushes to get them out first. So you can't be sure of what the details are because everybody's being briefed by different people. But it appears that most of the contract comes in bonuses that are triggered at different times. So in effect, it will give them outs maybe every 2 or 3 years to escape the contract, and it possibly, I haven't seen the language of it, give Mahomes outs as well if he does want to go. So the actual salaries are small, the bonuses are much bigger. They are prorated against the contract, the length of the contract in terms of salary cap, and there's also 2 performance bonuses. Every year in the 10 years of the extension, he'll get $1.25 million if they win the AFC Championship, and he'll get $1.25 million if he's the MVP of the league.
What are the chances, Mike, that Patrick Mahomes, not what are the chances, he's definitely going to transcend the sport, but at what point does that happen? It is already happening for him, obviously, with his Super Bowl ring. It's going to be pretty quick, you suspect. This contract is now perhaps a head-turning thing for many people around the world, many casual fans around the world. But it's also about the way he plays the game, the excitement that you get from watching Mahomes alone. Like, there is a chance that this guy becomes possibly one of the most famous faces the NFL has ever seen.
I think that's also absolutely correct, and I think you sort of saw it in their march to the Super Bowl and the playoffs in the Super Bowl. You got the feeling that Mahomes is going to be the next face of the NFL. He's a very affable young man. He's an attractive one, and he plays with the kind of highlight reel every week. It's kind of like the old days of the NBA and Sports Center and Michael Jordan. Let's show 3 dunks from tonight's game. Mahomes is almost guaranteed to make some kind of spectacular play, unusual play, special. It's a great case for the NFL, and of course, in America, where money talks, Mahomes, I think, now becomes the marketable face of the NFL.
So he turns 25 in September. At what point do we expect him to peak? Is he currently operating at his peak? He's playing at an unbelievable level, but when it comes to quarterbacks, sometimes you kind of age like a fine wine.
I think his peak is still to come, and that's partly because they're still adding pieces for him. They drafted Brian Hilaire from LSU to sort of replace Kareem Hunt, who they lost 2 years ago, as a multi-purpose explosive running back. Last year they drafted McCole Hardman because they thought they might not have Tyreek Hill, although Hill unexplainably escaped suspension for the kind of thing that most players get suspended for in the NFL. More explosive pieces. They'll probably have to find a long-term replacement for Travis Kelce. Their defense needs, obviously, to get them to Super Bowls, their defense needs to be strong, but they did a decent enough job last year. And I think his ceiling is probably pretty unlimited, given the way the team will be structured around him, and the way he makes players better on that team.
The only one small caveat to a deal like this is, given the size of the deal, may mean that Andy Reid puts so much on his shoulders, and look, this is, he's obviously very capable of dealing with it, but that, for example, they invest a little bit less in the offensive line. He gets hit a little bit more over the next couple of years as the money in his contract eats into the salary cap, especially if the salary cap comes down. If, for example, there's a truncated season, there's no fans allowed in stadiums, the income comes down, salary cap comes down, his number stays at the number that has been agreed, and so all of a sudden they're looking at replacement level talent who are protecting him, and maybe that slows him down a little bit. But that's the only wrinkle in this whole deal.
Well, the other one is injury, of course. But because, like I said, because I think they've got these outs in the contract, they're only in for the guaranteed money. But the guaranteed money is huge, and if he gets a career-ending injury, they'll still be on the hook vis-a-vis the salary cap for that. But Andy Reid is a very good manipulator of rosters. He was in Philadelphia as well, but he never had a quarterback with the talent of Patrick Mahomes. He would draft for the future. He would draft to build depth. He's not afraid to bring guys up within the system. And right now they have a pretty good offensive line. It's solid across and not particularly old. I think the cap will go down next year for the COVID reasons, but normally in the NFL, the cap goes up every year. So that a 10-year deal like Mahomes right now, however you want to figure the average of it, and the average is sort of around just under 40 million. That's only 5 million more than Russell Wilson. And in 8 years, for example, it's probably going to be less than whoever the hot quarterback is in the league right then. So, Mahomes gives away a little of that bargaining power in return for all this money up front and basically lifetime security, beyond lifetime security. So I think in that sense, it's a pretty good deal. And I kind of applaud Andy Reid for being so creative and looking so far ahead and being decisive, just saying, this is my guy. I want to keep him, and I will build around him as best I can. I just wish I had written my Chiefs preview next week instead of 3 weeks ago.
He's essentially guaranteed 275 million if things don't go very well, and if things go really well, he'll get 477 million, and if things go exceedingly well and he wins a load of Super Bowls, he'll make 500 million, and that's just from playing football. I think the other point here, when you throw all this money into one contract, the agents understand and the Chiefs understand that it creates, as you said, as Eoin said, the whole world looking around going, whoa, I need to see this. And suddenly his marketability, because he's already rich, it's like the Kardashian effect where everybody wants, oh, these rich people, what are these rich people doing? Like his marketability has gone through the roof in the last 24 hours from where already was the most marketable athlete in America at the moment.
One of the wisest things I ever heard in my life is nobody ever comps a poor man. The more money you have, the more stuff flows to you. And Mahomes now could go out and buy a small country if he felt like it and go live there. But I think the person this affects probably the worst is Jerry Jones, who probably fell off the top of his office when he saw the figures, and Dak Prescott's agents were running around high-fiving each other in their offices. But it's raised the bar for quarterbacks, and when you're on successful teams, it raises the bar for all the players on the team. What Phil Jackson once called the disease of me. Everybody who plays on a championship team thinks in large part it's due to their efforts, and they then want more money. They wind up going on to other teams, and it becomes more difficult to keep your championship team together. But Reid is very much like Bill Belichick in the sense that he thinks long term, and with the exception of a couple of years and his failure to win the big one until last year, his Philadelphia teams, his Kansas City teams were always in contention. He was able to maintain a pretty high level without having those really bad stretches of 2 or 3 years where you have to retool. He got in salary cap trouble once, and I think he learned a lesson from that. So, I think we're in now the age of Mahomes. Basically, when you spell Mahomes, that last S becomes a dollar sign.
Mike, I'm not sure if this is kind of correct to think this or not, but it does sometimes feel that there is still a little bit of a glass ceiling to be shattered from the NFL's perspective. That I know seems ridiculous given the amount of money, the amount of fame that is bestowed on these guys, but like the Tiger Woods figure, the LeBron James / Michael Jordan figure, the Messi or Ronaldo figure of the NFL, like if you pick that person, it's Tom Brady probably over the last couple of years, but there's still a sense that he's not on the aforementioned names level, and there possibly hasn't been an NFL player on that level. And I'm talking about pure fame here. I'm not talking about fortune or sporting success. Like, I'm not sure if you go along with that there is still an opportunity to inch into that level of true worldwide transcendent fame. And I know it's kind of like a similar point to earlier on, but perhaps this is the opportunity now for the league and for this player.
I'm sure they're aware of that. I think that, your problem with American football is twofold. One is that it's not played at the high level around the world, like basketball is, for example. And the second one is that it's the ultimate team sport. in the sense that you're dealing with, a minimum of 22 different players who are contributing, plus special teams and bench and all of that kind of stuff. So it's harder for one player to dominate the game. And with basketball, as I said before, you were always assured that you would get something from Michael Jordan every game to put on your highlights show, to put on the news bulletins. In American football, you can't necessarily be assured of that, but Mahomes comes pretty close to be able to delivering that. And like I said, he's a very affable, presentable, articulate face for the game if he wants to be too. And I'm sure that won't escape the marketing people either in Kansas City or in New York, in the league offices. I think you could put a Mahomes highlight reel already and use that to sell NFL highlights around the world. You can say, look, this is what our game is about. And remember, when it started in Britain in the early 80s, it was based on a highlight show, a program that aired on Sundays showing the previous Sunday's games. So they had a chance to take all the best out of what they showed. And that was part of the reason, along with running opposite Antiques Roadshow and Songs of Praise, that the NFL got its original popularity. And it's only grown from there. So, I think you're absolutely right. This is the best chance that they have had to have a really marketable single face for the league worldwide.
And when you think about it, he's in a tiny little market like Kansas. I mean, it's obviously not tiny, but it's not LA and it's not New York and it's not even Chicago. Like, when somebody emerges in those markets who is as good as Patrick Mahomes, this contract is probably going to end up looking like good value. And if you're Lamar Jackson, you must be like, good man, Patrick. I like the money you just got.
Yeah, kind of like Dak. Now remember, Kansas City's in Missouri, and it does have great barbecue. So that's something. I would be very leery. I would be really doubtful if Lamar Jackson were to get a 10-year deal from Baltimore. Of course, he's still on his rookie contract, and Mahomes was on his rookie contract where they had taken up the 5th-year option and paid him more. So he's still on a small deal this year. It'll be a $23 million deal next year, I think, and then he goes into the 10-year contract. So Lamar Jackson's got 2 more years and 3 if they pick up the option before they have to deal with that. But given Lamar Jackson's game, and he's been really good at protecting himself, but the unstated thing is that if any quarterback who runs a lot, like a running back, is going to be subject to the possibility of injury, and a 10-year deal might be something that's better to consider for the Ravens.
I would happily, if I was Lamar Jackson, sign a shorter deal for.
It looks like I've frozen behind.
For more money. One last point, though, about that. That's the other kind of wrinkle in all this, is that obviously Mahomes came very close to being knocked out for the season when his knee bent back horribly in the middle of a game last year. He kind of came back out, I think, in that game, and then maybe missed one game and played almost immediately after that. So he's very tough, but equally, he is somebody who likes to get out of the pocket and run around and will get hit from time to time.
Yeah, and I think that toughness is what they're considering. He was hurt. He's been hurt a couple of times. He's played hurt, and he's played effectively hurt, which is something that's hard for a quarterback to do. Now, lots of quarterbacks do play with injuries that we're not really as aware of how severe they are. Especially the ones to the rib area and stuff where when you're throwing it, it's hard to get that extension. We think more about leg injuries as being the stoppers, but I think the one thing they may well consider going into the future is that when they have a big lead in the game, that they might rest Mahomes and play a backup occasionally, just to protect the investment and to prepare for the future. Although, in 4 years, Andy Reid is going to be trading his version of Jimmy Garoppolo for another team's first-round draft choice somewhere, because he will draft a quarterback to develop. The guy will play 1 or 2 games when Mahomes is out. He'll do really well, but they've got Mahomes on a 10-year contract, so they won't be able to afford to keep him. So he will go. I guarantee that.
Yeah, that makes sense. He's finally found his guy, and he's not going anywhere either. He could end up having 3 or 4 rings at the end of this, and his genius will be anointed by the fact that he ends up discovering and turning Patrick Mahomes into the dominant player of his generation. Mike, it's an incredible story. Thanks very much for giving us some of the details.
Hey, thanks, man. It's always good to talk to you.
It's Mike Carson there giving us some thoughts on Patrick Mahomes becoming the new Michael Jordan. Right, if you want to get in touch with us this morning, you can you can text us on WhatsApp. 087 918 180 is the number, and you can always leave just use the hashtag OTBAM on Twitter. We mentioned this a little bit earlier on this morning, but we've got the very latest episode of Alan Quinlan's How's the Head coming up for you today on the OTB Sports app. It's a brilliant hour-long chat with the Coronas lead singer Danny O'Reilly, as the lads chat everything from lockdown to releasing an album this summer and O'Reilly's sporting background. We've already brought you Alan's first 2 pieces with the All Blacks legend John Kerwin and the comedian Pat Short. Episode 3 is exclusively available today at 12 o'clock on the OTB Sports app. So you got to stop what you're doing, head over to the App Store, search for OTB Sports, download the app and tune in to OTB Sports Radio at 12 o'clock. Here's a little sample of what's to come.
I think I've definitely had ups and downs, but I think I've just gotten a bit more sort of self-aware, and I'm sort of just acknowledging, okay, well, I feel a bit crap today, and that's okay as well. And trying not to even hide it or like bury it down or anything, you know, just ringing someone and just go, geez, I feel really weird today. I just don't feel worried about this and that. And, you know, whoever it is that you can talk to, you know. So I think that's the difference for me. As I said, when I got to, what happened with us was we moved to London and signed a big record deal with Island Records in probably about, it was with the Long Way album. So it was probably about 2016, I think. And so we moved over to London and we signed a big deal, and then it didn't go well. Didn't happen. Ireland dropped us and we moved back to Ireland, and I was like, oh, this is, you know, what am I going to do now? This is the end. And I sort of got a bit of writer's block for the first time as well, which I never really had before. And it wasn't so much writer's block, but I was writing stuff, but I just kept telling myself it was crap. Like, I'm sure you had it in sport as well, when your form is getting away from you or whatever, and you think you're not firing at all cylinders.
And did you have to try and figure that out yourself, or did you speak to anyone? Obviously, you come from a family embedded in music, and your mum was just an incredible artist. Did you speak to her? Did you speak to other people, other bands? Because rejection is something that we all struggle with a little bit. You know, 100%. Even if you're the kid in the schoolyard where you don't get picked in the team when there's a game of soccer going on in the yard. Nobody likes rejection. So essentially you rejected here. How do you 100%. Dust yourself down, and what did you do?
And that's the funny thing, because we went in with our eyes open. We weren't like a naive young band going, this is it, this is our big break and it's all going to happen. Like, we went in knowing the stats of how many bands don't make it, and, you know, you need a bit of luck on your side and all the different things with Ireland. So we were aware that it wasn't a sure thing by any stretch of the imagination, and, you know, we were half expecting it. We said, we'll roll the dice and see what happens, but still, when it didn't happen, it still got to me, and I didn't even realize it as much as the start. But definitely, I mean, I'm lucky that I have people in the industry, as you say, like even my dad as well was always my mum's manager and was involved in her record label, so he understands the business as well. My sister's in the industry as well, so I had them to talk to about it, and a lot of friends, and it definitely hit me when I came back. But I think it was actually, we had a gig after we moved back from London. We played Electric Picnic a few years ago, and this was when I was feeling, and sometimes it's probably, again, the same as sport. You get a big performance and it sort of snaps you out of it, you know, a big game, and you play well and you're like, oh yeah, no, I'm back.
It kind of reinforces the confidence and strength and belief in you, doesn't it?
100%. And I heard Paul O'Connell talk about this recently as well in the podcast. It was just one of those games where the ball always came to you. You know, you just happened to be in the right place, and he was man of the match in whatever game he was talking about. But it's like, when we played Electric Picnic, came back and we had a really good slot. It was a beautiful evening. We were on at like 7 p.m. on the Friday, and like it was packed, like, you know, thousands of people. And then I remember just thinking to myself after, how could I even consider doing anything else. Like this, I am so lucky. This is the best job ever. And sometimes you need a little reminder like that. And I think that was a turning point to get me out of the little bit of a low after moving back from London, like, you know.
Yeah, great stuff there from Danny O'Reilly in conversation on this week's How's the Head with Alan Quinlan. As we said, you can only get it at noon today on the OTB Sports app. A couple of quick texts from you from a little bit earlier on. As Jose's got older and less pretty, he's become less relevant. That seems trivial, but there was a best mate quality to Mourinho when he was at Chelsea and Inter. But that's a young man's trick, and he's no young man now, says Tom. Nathan, you're no young man now either.
Well, a bit younger than yourself, Ger, so let's not go there.
No, nobody knows that, though. It doesn't look that way.
We'll see him Friday week.
How does Mourinho's looks feed into his ability as a manager?
I thought he looked quite well last night. He was looking a bit more youthful. He wasn't as washed up as he's been at times over the last few weeks, taking great joy in his players scrapping against each other. But yeah, I think there's no question he is a little bit washed up in that. Do the players respond the way they have? Nobody's surprised it's ended up like this at Tottenham. The only surprise is it's happened quite so quickly. There was no bounce whatsoever. And last night's performance again was just so flat. There's no real sense of any sort of game plan, any tactical mastery that is bringing the best out of Harry Kane or really bringing the best out of any players individually. So it's hard to see how this goes on too far into next season.
Okay, all right. A reminder, everybody, OTB AM is brought to you by Gillette. We don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made of what matters. Nathan, we've got you on to talk about golf. We might do that in just a couple of minutes' time. But we've started with the football here, and that text has kind of kicked it off. We had Martin Lipton on a little bit earlier on. He actually seemed a little bit more confident in Mourinho's ability to get something happening here. I'm a little bit chastened, I would say, by the experience of how quickly we piled on Solskjaer and how bad a decision that was to keep with Ole Gunnar Solskjaer as the manager when Pochettino was available. It seemed like this was an absolutely foolish thing to be doing. But actually, over a period of time, Solskjaer has begun to unveil a plan. He has weeded those players who aren't Manchester United standard players out of the club, and he has got players in who are Manchester United standard. Still, whether or not Harry Maguire ends up being a brilliant signing for all that money, we'll see. But it seemed as if Lipton was suggesting that things are progressing, that he inherited a very deep rebuilding job at Spurs, that there's no pace in the team, notwithstanding how Pochettino had got them to a point, but that team was actually finished. And that was the end of that team. And that he's a calmer individual now, unlikely to fall out with Daniel Levy because there's nowhere else for Jose Mourinho to go.
It certainly seems like a more likeable individual. You can't see him, poking his fingers in somebody's eyes at half time in a match anymore. And yeah, maybe that's something he's lost that he needs to be at his very best. If it is a huge rebuilding job, where's the money going to come from? The only way you see them getting the money to rebuild is by selling Harry Kane, which would be such a massive setback for the club in everything they want to be, that you can't rebuild from there. So they need a new defence. 3 years ago, they had arguably the best defence in the Premier League when they had Danny Rose and Kieran Trippier at right back. Vertonghen and Alderweireld were exceptional at centre back. They're all pretty much gone at this stage. Certainly from the first team, Alderweireld and Vertonghen haven't been at the standard that we've been used to. In midfield, they've never really settled on a first choice central midfield pairing over the years, even when Pochettino was there. And then Heung-min Son and Harry Kane are the exceptional talents up front. But aside from that, players dip in, dip out. Dele Alli hasn't progressed the way you would want. So if he does this, if he somehow turns Tottenham around, and what is turning them around? Getting them into a Champions League place? Yeah. Maybe from where they are now, it is next season. That's still a heck of a fall from where they were 2-3 years ago under Maurizio Pochettino. So if he gets them into a Champions League place, yeah, but we can only go on what we've seen previously with Mourinho. And there's nothing in his career to suggest that he can turn this round.
Do we really think that's a drop-off from where Maurizio Pochettino left them if they get back into the Champions League? Like, would that Maurizio Pochettino team really have been able to go and challenge Manchester City or Liverpool properly for a title?
No, but he did get them challenging for titles on a couple of occasions. Had a brilliant crop of players who responded to him at the right time. And it took a little bit of time, but he had Harry Kane at his absolute peak. He brought the very best out of Dele Alli. He suddenly had two of the best players in the Premier League that, in a way, he had created. Can Mourinho do that? Can he get Kane back to where he was? Maybe he does. If Harry Kane turns up next season after a good break and can score 30 goals, Tottenham can achieve a whole lot. you just don't see it. You just do not see it from Mourinho that he can get the best out of his players. And I know he said it was a beautiful thing that Lloris and Son are scrapping away. It just shows that maybe the togetherness that was once there, this real belief that was in that Tottenham squad of what they can go and do, isn't there anymore. And there's just no spark off them. I used to love going to Tottenham, going to White Hart Lane, and the brilliant style of football, 100 miles an hour. Like last night is sort of what you see a lot from Spurs this season, even before the lockdown. I remember going to watch them and they beat Manchester City 2-0 and City battered them for an hour and then Zinchenko was sent off. But even then this wasn't a defensive masterclass where they had a brilliant structure. They just got away with it for an hour and no great attacking game plan. So here, if he can turn it around from here with very few signings in the summer, it will be a proper Mourinho masterclass of management. I just have never seen it before and I can't see it with this current group of players.
One last question on this. They're not actually playing as badly as we think they are at the moment. I suppose the point Lipton was making was that he ended up not having Son because he was he was in the army, and Harry Kane was injured for 3 months, and the team were actually less behind fourth spot than when he took over. So things have improved slightly, but it's slowly.
Yeah, but they're less behind fourth spot because it's been this slow bicycle race to get fourth spot. They've been fortunate that every other team around them has had massive dips as well. So I wouldn't give them a huge credit for that. I haven't seen the style of football get any better at all over the last 5-6 months since Christmas, since he should have had a little bit of time to make his impression on the team. Still think they have a couple of players individually who can turn up in the day and score a brilliant goal. But in terms of an overall game plan that gets the best out of Harry Kane, that gets Dele Alli back into the side, is it Mora, is it Son, is it Lamela? It doesn't seem to know what his best 11 is. And there is a lack of quality, unfortunately, for Spurs compared to what was there at Pochettino's peak. So what will they finish? 7th, 8th, maybe, with a push for the top 4 next season. But I honestly don't see Mourinho being there by Christmas.
What is the situation at Liverpool? Because we've had various people getting in touch saying that Liverpool badly need a midfielder or two capable of putting their foot on the ball and controlling a game without blitzing for 90 minutes, says Paul on WhatsApp. 087 9180 180 is the number. They were found out massively in Europe, it says here. This is the team who won Champions League last year and were in the final the year before, but they were found out massively in Europe. And while their league season has been mesmerising, the huge points gap is purely down to Man City's defensive woes and injuries. So who is that midfielder that they need, and is this a correct identification of the issues?
There's a lot of revisionism there, isn't there? That game against Atletico Madrid in the second leg, they battered Atletico Madrid for a good chunk of that game and just couldn't score. And then bad goalkeeping mistake, lets Atletico go and win the game. Their style of play has changed. I get they need a midfielder who can control the ball, but Liverpool do control the ball. They're a totally different team to the side that, say, got to the final against Real Madrid a couple of years ago, where they were the best counter-attacking team in Europe, and Europe suited them down to the ground because teams would come at them and there'd be all this space and behind. Now they dominate possession all the time. They just do it more with their defenders. So there's not so much little triangles between Henderson and Wijnaldum in midfield. It's more getting Gomez and particularly Van Dijk on the ball, and then those crossfield passes from Alexander-Arnold and Robertson. So that's the way they're set up to play right now. Yeah, they probably do need somebody with a little bit more creativity in midfield that can break down a defence. I'm just not sure if Klopp is going to go for the number 10, or maybe he does go for the like of Thiago, who would just be a sensational signing, even at 29. Like, he is a proper footballing blue blood. I know he's been injured since the restart, but you think of that performance that he had in the middle of midfield against Chelsea in the last game in the Champions League when they beat them 3-0, and he absolutely ran the show. And he will be used to coming to a club like Liverpool, who will have 70% possession in the vast majority of matches. He'll know how to keep things ticking over. He'll know to pick the right pass at the right time. So if they could get him, I know everyone feels it goes against their entire transfer strategy, but he's only got a year left in the contract. If you're getting him for 30 million, a player of that quality who knows how to win trophies, again, who knows how to play in a style of football when you're dominating games, I think you got to snap him up.
Yeah, like it's not a bad shot, especially if he's going to be happy enough with the fact that there are some games that he simply won't play because...
But he never plays a lot of games. Like that is a one concern maybe, that I think he's played 30 league games once in his career so far.
I'm looking at a headline here from 2017, the injury curse of the Alcantara family. I mean, he's been injured at this moment. He had surgery, as he said, for his groin. He's had ligament damage, knee ligament damage in 2014. His injury profile is terrible. And I think that's one of the things that perhaps we don't actually recognise as something that Klopp values hugely, or at least something that's gone his way so well. Like, I mean, like Virgil van Dijk, the reason why he's been in all of the conversations around the best players in the world over the last couple of years is because he's played all the time and he's never got injured. And when we talk about players and the depth squad in this Liverpool team, like the depth squad sometimes actually isn't that important when your first 11 is so robust.
Yeah, and they have had injuries though. Obviously, Alisson missed a good chunk of games, and Adrian came in and did a okay job, kept the show on the road. Jordan Henderson missed a chunk of games at one stage as well, but they haven't had an absolute injury crisis. But then maybe the style of football that they play right now, I think that while there's high intensity pressing from the front three, behind that they sort of play it at their own tempo. That they're not going to pick up as many muscle injuries as other clubs because they're not the same stress on their body. But that would be the risk. That are you bringing Thiago in to play? Maybe start 15 Premier League games and come off the bench in another 15.
Start your Champions League games. So, like, if you think back to the end of Makelele's career, I think he started 8 to 10 games a season, and they were all in the Champions League at the very end of his career, where it was like, this is our Rolls Royce. We get it out when we need it, and we need it in the Champions League. We don't need it for a run-of-the-mill game against Bournemouth at home. So he's not even in the squad that day. You're resting it, and that's where your sports science comes in. It's exactly the type of signing that a squad like this makes to keep them at the level they're at, as opposed to just a bunch of young players who are going to be... They'll do that too, I presume. Like, there will be young players who... The next Andy Robertson, for example, a player you don't expect to make, but who ultimately, with good quality coaching and opportunity, turns into somebody over the next 3 or 4 years.
Well, that's an area that you can imagine they might go and spend a bit of money even on. So they've Nico Williams, who can play at right back and might be the backup to Trent Alexander-Arnold. He's 19. He might get a bit more game time next season. Harvey Elliott will probably get a bit more game time as well in midfield next season. But they've nobody really, unless they put Milner in at left back for Andy Robertson. I know last year they were interested in Lloyd Kelly, who went to Bournemouth in the end and finally started a couple of games for Bournemouth. He's only 20. Good, strong player who could play centre-back. I think he played centre-back last weekend. Obviously, Bournemouth are a bit of a mess at the moment. So they could go back for somebody like him and spend 20-25 million on a player who could play across the back line that, again, gives them a bit more support. They do need a bit more strength and depth, particularly, I think, in the attacking positions. I think they need somebody to put a bit of pressure on the front three because Divock Origi is never going to do it. I've never been as confused about a player as Origi, in that you think of the goals he scored, that late winner against Everton, and even that goal summed it up. You know, he didn't celebrate properly. You've just scored a 90th minute winner in the Merseyside derby. This should be the greatest moment of your career. You're running the length of the pitch, and he seemed to be confused and tried to take the ball out of the goal as if he just scored an equaliser and they were going to go and win it. And, you know, he's the hero against Barcelona, scores in the Champions League final. Yet still, you watch him on Sunday against Aston Villa, and he looks like a player who doesn't have any great confidence or any great knowledge of what his role in the team is, and he's never going to be somebody who's putting proper pressure on the front three. So if they can get somebody in who can make an impression over a first season, somebody like Adama Traore, who hasn't even been starting every game for Wolves over the last while, and bring something very, very different in terms of just his raw pace and putting the head down and running at defences and drawing fouls out of teams for, again, what may not be... I'd be interested to see if they were to go from what the price tag would be. Are you looking at 50, 60 million? Because right now, even with the current market, he looks like he'd be worth it. So I think that'll be an area that he would like somebody else. It is, are they going to get enough game time within that front three, which I know is why a lot of people feel they didn't go for Timo Werner, that the price was too high for a player who may just be fourth choice. So Klopp may not be panicking. I would say Klopp is looking at Manchester City and thinking they've got a far bigger rebuilding job this summer than Liverpool do.
You've got to stay on top of it, though, right? Because
you do. It's the old Alex Ferguson thing. You strengthen from a position of strength, and that's why I think Thiago would be a quality signing. Sometimes you just throw you have your plan of signing young players who you can invest in, and you get 5-6 years out of, and you might have a bit of a sell-on fee, or signing very young players that they've done brilliantly and sell on to Bournemouth for 15-20 million quid, having spent little or nothing on them, which has kept them ticking over. But sometimes you just need players who will maintain you at that level. And Thiago comes in 2-3 seasons, has that quality where he'll settle into the dressing room, has an expectation. I think you make exceptions from time to time, and he's one you would make an exception for.
Yeah. And look, the last question is, how much money will they actually spend this summer? What's the informed conversation around that?
Well, Liverpool are the only team really who have spoken about the market changing because of the crisis. So nobody else is really saying we're going to have to reduce dramatically. And it came because Chelsea got in early with Werner, and club is having to respond to that. You look at their match day revenue figures from previous seasons. You look at the increase in broadcasting commercially, how they have done. And I think they brought in 250 million quid over the last 5-6 years from selling players, vastly superior to pretty much every other side. So if they need to spend, they can spend it right now. It's whether, are they in for a £100 million player? I would doubt it. But you would expect if they want to spend 40 million on a couple of players right now, like, it should be no problem.
40 million a couple of times?
40 million a couple of times. Why not? You're the champions.
Well, they are, and they've been well run, and they've been rich, and they've been pumping out money. So, like, but then the owners have got to this point by not flashing the cash a lot, and by being prudent, and by spending what they've had and what they've created.
Spent 140 million on Alisson and Van Dijk between them. So
they got that money. They got that money from selling somebody.
Coutinho.
Yeah.
But well, maybe you flip it this time and you bring in an Adama Traore, and he goes so well that you can sell Mo Salah next summer for 50 million. You get your money back straight away.
150 million for Salah. Let's talk a bit about Bryson DeChambeau, and we had Paul McGinley on last night, wide-ranging, talking about loads of stuff, in particular about the science of how DeChambeau's hitting the ball further than everybody else, and is whether or not this is going to change the game, and if everybody else is going to copy what he's doing.
It'd be a real worry for golf that suddenly it becomes a power game rather than a game of technique and of artistry at times and shot making, because you look at sports that have become power sports, and there is a real risk that goes with that when you're a 17, 18-year-old and you think, I need to be as big as Bryson DeChambeau. So golf needs to be careful around that. I can't imagine every young player is going to go and copy this and decide to put on 3 stone of muscle. But it's just been fascinating to watch how he's pulled it off, because when he, at the end of last season, said, you know what, I'm going to go away and I'm going to come back a different player. There's so many risks. Well, ordinarily, everything you hear from the sports scientists, is there are so many risks with putting on that amount of weight that in terms of injury. But he's played 4 weeks in a row. He's contended 4 weeks in a row. His body seems to be able to cope with it just fine. So it's been an interesting experiment. There's no better player to go and try and explain how he's done it and ram it down everybody's throats as to how he's smarter than the rest than Bryson DeChambeau. But absolutely, like, he's looked at the statistics, and long hitters win more golf tournaments. And he won his tournament last week, not just because he hit the ball further than anyone else, but he putted better than anyone else. The week before, Dustin Johnson won the tournament because he putted better than anyone else. And suddenly he's put himself in that mix of Dustin Johnson, Rory McIlroy, DeChambeau's in there now as well, Brooks Koepka, that if you have a good week on the green, you consistently hit it so far, you're probably going to win. And sort of weighing up, all right, you know, I mightn't hit it straight all the time, but if there's 5-6 weeks a year where I put well, my distance is going to ensure that I win this tournament. He probably, I would expect, looking at DeChambeau, weighed up those statistics last summer, realised where he was falling a little bit short, and has somehow managed to pull off what he needed to do. Yeah,
you know, I mean, golf doesn't seem too interested in learning the lessons from other sports, and if they're the rules of engagement, they're the rules of engagement, and he's going to be rich. That's what's going to happen at the end of this.
He's going to be filthy rich at the end of this, and all you need is a hot streak for 4 or 5 months. He had it a couple of years ago where he won 4 tournaments. It's whether he can sustain this, whether as we go into the new major season over the next few months, he's favoured for pretty much every major, despite having never finished in a top 15 in a major before. If he can go and win a couple of them, I think people will seriously start asking questions as to how golf is going and what sort of a power game
as the stable doors flutter in the breeze. Right, Nathan, good stuff. Next time we're going to hear from Nathan is going to be on Thursday night, Aston Villa against Manchester United, alongside Vinnie Perth.
Yes, live commentary from Villa Park. They were poor on Sunday, I thought, Villa, little or no ambition. We got them again on Sunday against Crystal Palace, so I'd be interested to see, do they, at home against Manchester United, do they try and put a little bit of pressure, or are they just so frightened by what they've seen from United? Again, they sit back and somehow try and come away with a 0-0 draw and put it all on that game against, because you look at that game against Palace next Sunday, that looks like a must-win for Villa right now.
It seems like they need one more point as well. That victory, and that won't be enough, because obviously Watford have Norwich tonight, so we'll know by then. We'll know by tomorrow night exactly what they need to do. So we've been bringing you live and exclusive Premier League commentary on OTB Sports across the season. Plenty more coming for you this week, as I said, on the OTB Sports app tomorrow night at 8:15. Aston Villa against Manchester United. And then Sunday at 2:15, it's Villa against Crystal Palace. Nathan and Damien Delaney on duty for that one. On Sunday at 4:30, it's Spurs versus Arsenal. Stephen and Brian Kerr, just a point between the two teams at the moment. But that is it from OTB AM this morning. If you haven't got the OTB Sports app, go and get it. Search for OTB Sports in the App Store and download it. Today, for example, on OTB Sports Radio, Alan Quinlan's How's the Heads with Danny O'Reilly. Gold today is Ronnie Delaney's Legends interview. World Cup Revisited is France 98. OTB Gold, Bod meets Issa Nasewa. This is a brilliant interview from just 2 weeks after Issa had kicked his last score, which was the winning penalty in a Champions Cup final in Bilbao for Leinster against Racing. And a remarkable career, one of those with a mid-career hiatus as well. And then tonight, obviously live, the show from 7 o'clock to 10 with the News Round, the football show and much more. If you've missed anything this morning, you can catch it back through the OTB AM podcast. It's all time-stamped. Ronan O'Gara, Martin Lipton on Spurs, Football with Nathan and Patrick Mahomes' mega deal with Mike Carlson. We're back live tomorrow morning from 7:30. We'll see you then.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, we don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made of what matters.